Hey everyone, Matt Landfair here, primary and secondary. Welcome to ModCast. Today is June 26, 2022. The episode number is 303, like British 303 British. How to Revolver. We're going to talk about Revolver stuff. We're going to talk about revolvers as if we're talking to someone who doesn't have that much experience with them to help them. We have a unique panel. My background's in law enforcement. I like revolvers very much. I find that they produce a good balance. I enjoy shooting them. I enjoy dry fire. I enjoy training with them. I carry them. My primary is a semi-auto, but still those revolvers provide me with, especially with my dry fire, some good workout for the trigger finger. Overall, they're enjoyable. I like them very much. Let's see here. I think we should probably have Cody give his quick intro. Yeah, believe it or not, the reason why we're doing this episode is because of him.
Yep. So Cody Osborn, I'm the marketing director over at Taurus. And I talked to Matt a little bit about this earlier, but I really just I was in the, the shooting world and this training industry and this, the marketing guns and sales of guns. And I was just a big semi-auto guy. That's all I've really ever shot. And in my new position, a lot of revolver carry. And so I've been on this path of like learning the different situations of it. And I talked to Matt, I was like, dude, I want to set up this podcast because I thought there was a lot of people out there that were getting into that shoot quite heavily and are very performance-based shooters that are starting to get into revolvers. And we have this mentality, we don't really like to ask questions because we're the gun experts in our community. And so I would offer myself up as a guinea pig to be the guy that can shoot pretty decent, but still have a ton of newbie questions and hopefully answer that for most of these guys and girls that are out there training a lot who are looking at revolvers to fit into their lifestyle. So I will be the guy to ask the dumb questions. So
it's awesome to be that guy, though, I got to say. Also, for people listening right now live, this intro is being done near the end. So, yeah, there's going to be some magical editing done where this is actually going to be at the beginning. So just wait, it's going to be awesome. Chuck Haggard.
So since we're talking about revolvers, I like revolvers. I've been shooting revolvers a long time. I started in police work back when cops carried revolvers. So I've been shooting them a long time. My first handgun was a revolver. My first center fire handgun was a revolver. And then we had talked, I guess, magic of editing, that same first center fire handgun ended up being my first duty gun when I became a police officer. And even when we transitioned to semi-autos, I utilized revolvers for backup guns. I continue to utilize snub revolvers as backup gun to this day. And then sometimes they're my choice for concealed carry. I hunt with revolvers. I have hunted for decades with revolvers, a variety of both small game and big game. So it's that I like shooting them and I like teaching them.
Cecil.
Yeah, so no law enforcement experience, just a regular dude who's been shooting all my life. The second gun I ever owned was a revolver. Colt 1917, which to this day kills me that I sold.
Oh,
that was right after college, had no money and, started going through that. And I look now and you look at the prices on Gunbroker to replace it. I bought it for, I think $325 and I'm like, oh, good. I'm an idiot. There's something about revolvers that I've always loved. Even from back then, there's something, I don't know, there's a soul to them, I think, especially when you get the right one, the kind that kind of goes back to those early days. There's something that feels more than just shooting, which I know is like really stupid martial artist Zen stuff, but that's how I feel about it. I've been essentially in a non-permissive environment pretty much since I got out of college for business. So, I tried to experiment with all kinds of different guns to carry in that environment. And pretty much the last 20 plus years, it's been more often than not a snub. It just ends up working better. So I've spent a lot of time shooting it and, picking the brains of guys like Chuck and Daryl and guys who run it. And, I just, the efficacy of a revolver is, to me, it's proven. So I think for a lot of new people, it may very well be the best choice.
Cecil, I don't think your intro could have been better for the first thing what we're going to talk about, because we're going to talk about lifestyle, concealment, and NPC, and how a revolver shines with all of that.
Awesome.
So far, I guess later on in this recorded episode, we're going to talk about performance. We're going to talk about ballistics and that. For this, let's talk about what are some of the reasons why you found this, Cecil? Why does this work so well for you compared to other things that you've tried?
Well, it's really funny because, you start, and I'm a child of the 80s, right? So I was reading Combat Handguns magazine, and, I think I was freshman in high school, 78, 79, and kind of came through that area where, 1911 ruled and certainly the full size guns ruled. But then as I got into that, again, that non-permissive environment where I've got to carry, where I'm going to carry, but I will suffer a major financial catastrophe if I get made. And I just, running any of the guns I had was not that easy. I assumed it was me. I always assumed it was me making the mistake. So I kept trying and trying, and it just didn't. So then I was like, all right. So I got a 642 and I started running that. All of a sudden, things magically changed. And so you start diving into it. And really what it boils down to is, a revolver is nice and round, right? Where a semi-auto is all right angles. Well, the problem is the human body is not made of right angles. But really, the only right angle we have is our shoulders. Everything else is some level of roundness. And so hard right angle to roundness is much easier to see. Round on round, it just blends together, especially if you know how to dress. So I love wearing ties, with my dress clothes, because ties end up adding to those shadows and valleys that you're already round anyway. You've already got round stuff in your clothing and your body, and that tie in the right shirt actually just adds to that. So instead of having that right angle of the bottom of the magazine or the turn of the slide going into the frame, you don't have any of that. If you're running a revolver, say, 3-inch, more a 3-inch barrel or longer, now you're running into a right angle. But short of that, and hell, that's down your pants anyway. That's not the part that you have to worry about. Mm-hmm. So it just became really quickly, I'm like, man, I can carry this in tons of, tailored dress clothes where I'm in front of people for hours, literally hours at a time, where I can't be made. And nobody ever guessed. But yet it was accessible and usable. Whereas I had a couple for a little while. I was running a first gen PPS, which I thought was a phenomenal gun. And I'm still extremely pissed that Walters dropped that gun because it's such a great gun. And as much as I love that, it still wasn't as good as 642, or now I'm running the LCR all the time. It's one of those things. And then I recently, I got not recently, it's been like 3 years now with the LCR. It's now with concealment, we have a better idea of concealment with things like the Enigma and better ideas how to do it. It becomes even easier to do this stuff, or something like a Dark Star Gear Hitchhiker or the Filster City Special. All of a sudden, these things that 25 years ago, I just couldn't do. Now it's like, yeah, no problem.
Yep. And I talked to Matt a little bit about that. It was like the realization of running a revolver on the Enigma, but tucked in shirt, and I said, I'm pretty Western and it's, cowboy boots and a pearl snap half the time. And I always had a problem with it, tucking in my shirt and still being able to draw the gun and conceal it. And I remember running the, full size gun and still an Enigma and stuff, but it was like, man, yeah, it looked like I had a big old gut, and it's always an issue. Then, yeah, running just a revolver on an Enigma, it was like nothing was there, and then I was all day. I could carry it all day, no issues whatsoever. I wasn't fiddling with it, every time I sat down and stood up, sat down and stood up. I'm Catholic, so at church we have to sit down and stand up like 50 times, during mass. So I wasn't like nonstop, just like fiddling with the gun like I would with a full size gun. And this is what I normally carry, when I'm not, like you said, like dressed nice. So I am used to that, but I would still sit there and be worried about it the whole time. So
there's definitely something to be said for carrying a revolver appendix. And unless you've done it, you don't know. It's so much easier, and access is easy as it's appendix, but just the overall concealment and the comfort, it's noticeable.
Well, revolvers were the original appendix carry gun. A lot of people think this is a new trend. I was carrying a snub appendix when I was a baby cop, and I picked that up from guys who had 20 or 30 years on the street, and they got it from the guys before then. I can easily find pictures of like plainclothes cops, detectives from the 19s and the 1920s, things like that. They're carrying appendix. That was a very fast, accessible way to do it. A lot of the things that we know about the advantages of appendix nowadays, we lost and we had to rediscover.
Yeah. Well, and fortunately, we have people like Rhett, who makes some awesome videos and is unbelievably fast and does things. He's magical with a small LCR.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that the revolver in that kind of environment that you can't get with any semi-auto is it's really, really easy to change out the grips. Yeah. You can take those grips. You don't need a gunsmith. You don't need to send it off for 3 months and wait for something and pay $100, $200. You find some company, Easy Grips or somebody, pay whatever, $40, $50, $60. Get it in, take 2 minutes, and you've got either a gun that's now a fuller grip to help you shoot, or a smaller grip for carrying in a pocket, or that compromised grip, whatever that fits your hand, not mine, not the gun expert or whatever, but yours. And you can't. No I mean, what's the cool thing now? Everybody's like the 365 and the 365 XL. Oh, you can play with this, this. Yeah. But even in that range, it's still this very narrow range, even if you send it off to somebody who does an awesome job at grip stuff. Right. But with the revolver, it's a 2-minute job that anybody can do with a screwdriver. And you can make your deep cover, your MPE stuff that much more effective like that. And I don't hear any of these people who dismiss a revolver ever bring that up, because I think that 98% of them have never really run a revolver and don't understand it.
No, and I talked about this before with Matt, of like where people are at in their shooting career. And I've noticed this huge influx of people like myself who have just been shooting semi-autos for a long time. And yeah, we go out there, high performance, we're measuring our analytics and stuff like that. And we are trying to find the more specific niches for our guns. And I think that's why you're seeing this like crazy increase in this traffic for revolvers. And I'm seeing it from a manufacturer side of tracking what pages people are visiting, right? Through our website, through other people's websites, like all that. I can see like what people are searching for. And you notice like the gun media companies, like more and more stories on revolvers. They only do that because they're getting more and more interest in it. And they're seeing the analytics on the backside. So, and I think you're seeing that influx, because 4 years ago it wasn't like that.
No.
And And you're seeing that group of individuals that have bought in. They've been they're watching all these guys. They're watching Philster and all these instructors that through PNS and all this stuff of like what they're doing with semi-autos. And now they're starting to find those like niche segments within the industry. And it is a large group of people, I think, that have found this. And like I said, that's why I wanted to get on here and try to get some of those questions answered. And one of them you brought it up was with when you talked about the PPS and the single stack. And I said, this is like, at that time I saw the single stack guns and revolvers side by side, like take your pick, whatever fit you best, because it was like basically the same ammo count. PPS is 6, 7, or 8 round mag.
Yep.
Right. You can get that in a revolver, 5, 6, 7, 8. And but then with the introduction of the micro compacts, the high capacity micro compacts, and what that gave the industry, like our GX4, the flat mag on it is 11+1. So at what point, like when you're carrying and stuff, do you decide like, hey, I want to give up 5 rounds, like, because it's still a pretty small gun. I think most people would consider a micro compact to still be very, easily to be, carried, concealed pretty deep and hide it pretty well. I don't think it's as good as a revolver, but I think it's in the vicinity. It's close, And so at what point did you figure out like, hey, the revolver is a far better concealed carry gun when compared to the micro compact? Or what situations maybe,
It starts with figuring out what your mission is. Are we rescuing the hostages at Nakatomi Plaza, or am I going to jump on the trampoline with my kids in the backyard? Mm-hmm. And those are absolute extreme ends of the spectrum, but there's some truth there. Cecil?
And mine was basically I'm running the 642, or I was running the PPS in essentially the same holsters. Mm-hmm. And seeing a noticeable difference in concealment. Yep. No difference in access, no difference in functionality, but I was seeing a noticeable increase in my ability to run the revolver with tighter close, more tailored close, much more room for error than I would with the PPS. Not sad, because I still love the PPS. That's actually my daughter's carry gun. That's such a phenomenally great gun. But in that situation, it just became like I could really, really hide this. I started before the Enigma came out. I was playing with like smart carry for a while, for a few years, and I was getting into what Rhett Neumeier is talking about with the deep cover and trying to figure out a draw from that. And it just, there was no comparison to it. It was easy. Okay. It was just as easy to conceal the PPS as the 642 in the smart carry, but I could get that 642 out faster with a more solid grip out of it. So it became like, okay, do I shoot the PPS a little bit better? Yeah, kind of. Do I have the ability to reload faster with the PPS? Yeah, but I know I can get those first 5 rounds out much more efficiently and much more quickly with a same or greater level of concealment. So you start playing this game of, yeah, I should do the tactical thing and carry the semi-auto because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, right.
Or I could go with what I found for myself. And I'm not saying this is across the board that everyone's going to find this, but for me, in my environment, the clothes I wear with my body, it was much easier to run that. Yeah. And I found the same thing going to the Enigma, because I have a pre-production, like that's actually pre-Enigma that was originally set up for a 642. And then I kind of did some Kydex bending and made it fit my LCR. And that thing is just, I mean, that for me was almost a revelation, even above the Enigma itself. So, it's just playing with it in the same type of environment. And you have to be realistic. What are you getting out of it versus what you give up? right?
Yep.
Because there is a give up to it.
And I'm glad that you brought this specific word, was like what mission. And I've talked to this about a lot of people at Taurus and stuff. And I was like, man, because we talked about this a little earlier of like the amount of guns that you can buy from Taurus at its price point. I told them, I was like, an Academy Sports Outdoor, you could buy an 856 revolver, a 38 special, and then a micro compact 9mm for a grand total together at $620, right? And you look at most other guns, that's where they start, and you're getting two very mission specific guns, and then you could add in a full size gun to that array and still be under $1,000. And I've talked about that. I can't use the word mission specific to the Taurus customer because it sounds incredibly tactical, right? Like they're gonna go, oh my God, and roll their eyes. But I mean, I think that's the point that we're trying to get across, is like revolvers are now, I think people are just realizing how viable of a source, and they are an essential part of the array of guns that you need. On a 365-day scale of carrying a gun, that is a key point that I think it was a hole in a lot of people's kind of gun safe, basically, like what they were choosing to carry every day. You've seen this like influx of micro compacts. They came out that just blasted, so everybody was buying them, right? And then they're getting the standard full size guns. Those have stayed pretty steady. But now all of a sudden, over the last year, like I said, you've seen this spike in revolvers, and I think it's exactly what you're saying, because they've realized everybody goes through the same buying process of guns to me. And the gun, you start off with this ridiculous stuff, and you try to find those problems yourself. And I think they're finding that same gap in their carry guns is what you found, and what I found too. Like what a King's carry revolver can do for concealment. There's a lot of situations that applies to. Yep. But like in the beginning, even with me, still before I go to church, I'm like, man, especially seeing all shit going on in the world, you're like, all right, I want 6 rounds on, like, and I always have that in the back of my head. But, I am at the point where like my deep concealment is a factor for me, that I want that to be hidden, so it is, I do agree with you, just trying to like outweigh like what you're needing for that day.
Something that I've noticed with especially the small revolvers, I have found it easy to truly conceal a couple of snub nose revolvers on my person. Whereas, like we've all noted here in the conversation over the past hour and a half, that semi-auto pistols, because of butt size and shape and things like that, can be much more challenging, both from a concealment and a comfort level, to actually carry concealed. There's been times in my life where where I truly did not want at all to, and I know cops get sloppy about it because we can get away with it, where I don't want to print at all. I don't want anybody to know I've got a gun on me, where maybe the threat was a little higher. And so there have been cases where I've carried 2 snubs versus something else, and actually been fairly, really well armed.
Yeah. And I had that point of the realization, like with the Enigma, and like I said, we were going out, my daughter was playing in the water on the front porch and stuff. She wanted me to get in a little kiddie pool with her, and I was carrying my revolver and Enigma, and just went and put my swim shorts on. And dude, you could drop that thing under and you still cannot see. I was like, I had no shirt on, I was ready to go swim, and you could still hide that gun. That is a phenomenal feat. I think holster technology has come light years, right? Like, thank God. But I think there was something like, I didn't think any of my semi-autos could have done that, and been ready for those situations. So
Cody's an accomplished shooter with semi-autos. In the position he's now working, he might need to have a better, well-rounded understanding of how to revolver. And this is where we all come in. And so, yeah, we've had some cool discussions about, okay, so if you could make one, what would it be? What would be the caliber? What would be some of the features that you'd want? Barrel length, grip, hammer, hammerless, etc.
I'd immediately bring back the Ruger Security 6 series.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt, immediately. If I could wave a magic wand, I would immediately resurrect the Ruger Security 6 Speed 6 series.
Why?
So playing around with your Smith & Wessons, I know you've gotten into like end frames, K frame. Have you taken any of those apart yet?
No, I can't wait.
If you get into the guts, you'll be like, oh my God, this is like a medieval clock.
Awesome.
So if you look at the history of guns, like the old flintlocks, why was it a lock? And why were
locking?
Yeah, well, there were people who were accomplished artisans before guns got invented. And the people who were involved in building guns, the lock work, were locksmiths and clockmakers, which is why, two of the original types of guns, when the flintlocks and pre-flintlocks came out, one of them, I'm having a total brain flatulence on the name. So there's like matchlocks, the ones that use the match. And then that was the earliest guns. And then there was another one that you wound up the spring so that when you cocked it and fired it, it spun a little like a Zippo lighter wheel, and that would throw the sparks off of the flint. So that was literally the action that the clockmakers came up with. And then the flintlock, the lock makers came up with that type of thing. And that it was more reliable, became more popular. Well, until you get into modern semi-autos and some interchangeability and things like that. And by modern, I mean, 1911 was really, for what it was, revolutionary. But if you look at revolvers, they're very old school. There's a lot of parts in a revolver, and there's a lot of hand-fitted parts and things like that. Well, to my knowledge, the Security 6 was the first revolver that you could field strip.
Oh, wow.
Field strip a semi-auto pistol. Like you could literally field strip it instead of like, hey, we got to do some gunsmith shit and we might like lose a part or something.
Yeah.
So you can field strip a Security 6. Super tough. You can put a good trigger on them. They were in between. They were closer to L frame, but they were kind of in between K and L frame size. So they were a beefy, tough gun. I bought one. I bought a Security 6 4-inch stainless with my money. I was 17 years old coming out of basic training and wanted a centerfire handgun. My dad had to buy it for me, but I had the money from coming out of basic and AIT. And I've still got that gun. That gun was my first duty gun when I got hired on the job. And then I've had tens of thousands of rounds through that gun, and it still shoots great. A whole lot of those were Magnum rounds because when I was younger, you had to shoot Magnums. Was you didn't bother with 38s. That was just dumb. Now I know that wasn't dumb. That would have been a better idea.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So the GP100s, they're more, they're newer than the gun that replaced the Security 6 series. They are also, you can field strip them, not quite as easily. They do have some advantages, but they're also a bigger gun. So a gun like a Speed 6, which was the fixed sight, so it would be analogous to like a Model 13 or a Model 10. So it was a fixed sight. And I still have my Speed 6. It was my off-duty gun. It was 2 3/4 inches, I believe, because some of their barrel lengths were off from what Smith & Wesson did. And it was Smith, like Model 19, Model 66 was a 2.5 inch barrel. And I think it's 2 3/4 inch barrel. I've round butt. I don't have a bobbed hammer on that one, but I should have. Man, they were a joy to carry, and they shoot good. And then they're a lot more user level, like grunt level serviceable as far as like cleaning and maintenance and things like that. Just cool. Semi-auto.
Well, that's something that I've never even thought about, taking apart a revolver for maintenance, because That doesn't happen. I guess it did.
Yeah. So revolvers, the big reason why revolvers aren't still being used by the military of anybody past World War II and the Brits. I mean, we had a lot of them in the military, but they weren't like the standard issue, even if it wasn't a capacity thing for handguns. If let's say all semi-auto pistols had the same capacity as a revolver, semi-auto pistols would still be what the military chooses, because if you drop them, do something like drop them in the mud, and you got to take it apart and clean it or whatever the case may be, they're much, much more forgiving of those field conditions. Like, I'm going to drop it in the mud, things like that. One of the reasons that Jeff Cooper, and he actually killed people with a revolver several times in World War II, but he became such a big aficionado of the 1911 was things like, I forget which book it was, but he wrote a bit in one of his many books about doing a river trip with some other guys down. It may have been to Colorado, but it was a river rafting trip. So they were doing primitive conditions. They would put into the river every morning, and they would do the trip for the day. They would pull out at night, and then they were camping wherever they were at. So they were in the water a lot, and the water was very silty. So at the end of every day, he would take his 1911 apart and clean it. But his buddy that had an end frame revolver, the gun physically would not work. Like, there was so much grit in the gun, you couldn't pull the trigger. So they'd have to detail strip the revolver every day and clean it out to get the crap out of the gun. So just that type of thing. Semi-autos take abuse better than revolvers for the most part, but revolvers tend to take neglect better than semi-autos. You can, what used to be very common, I'm not advocating, but very common, like you can load a 38 revolver, let's say, put it in your sock drawer where you plan to grab it in case a burglar comes in the house, and like 20 years later, 30 years later, pick it up, pow, 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 it's going to work fine. But with the semi-auto, maybe the springs have taken a set. Maybe the magazine isn't going to feed. Maybe the lube dried out. Now the gun doesn't cycle past the first shot. So with that sort of thing, revolvers do have an advantage.
So, and I'm guessing your whole journey in law enforcement started with revolvers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I carried, so the reason I carried my Security 6 is my first duty gun. My department was issuing Model 66 Smith & Wessons, which was a good gun for the time. And of course, world famous people like Bill Jordan was who talked Smith & Wesson into building the K-frame 357 Magnum revolver, initially in blue as the Model 19, and the Model 66 came out so that it was stainless steel and more resistant to rust and that kind of thing. So they were issuing those, but when I got hired, our range master came in and said, that he didn't have enough guns to go around for my recruit class, that there was too many people. So told us what an authorized, your gun had to be a Smith Ruger or Colt 4-inch 357 or 38 revolver. So if somebody wanted to carry their own gun, they could do that. Otherwise, he was going to issue some of the class 38 revolvers. And I was like, oh my God, I can't carry 38. 38 will get you killed in the street. So I carried my own gun. Never got an issue revolver. Knowing then what I know now, I might have just taken one of the 38s that he had and ran with that. But as it was, so carried that gun for several years. And then we went to the Smith & Wesson 9mm is what we transitioned to. And then eventually we transitioned to the Glocks about 2006. But yeah, the first part of my life, it was the original, like, old school police work. We had big wooden sticks. We had 6-shooters. My job was still issuing dump pouches for the duty belt versus speed loaders. Yeah. You could carry your own speed loaders, but you had to buy them yourself, which meant I was working the street with a lot of guys that were too damn cheap to buy their own speed loaders. because I wear both hats, I can tell you that in my observation, the only thing cheaper than a cop is two cops, and the only thing lazier than a cop's a fireman. So guys wouldn't buy their own gear. They're on the street with dump pouches, and you're not going to have speed loaders. Dump boxes are literally worse than carrying ammo in your pocket. You're literally better off carrying ammo in your pants pocket than you are with dump pouches, because it's guaranteed you're going to lose some of your rounds. You're juggling bullets. You can't get them in the gun efficiently. There's much better ways besides speed loaders. I mean, if you don't have speed loaders, there's much better ways to carry ammo besides dump boxes. That was just the worst possible thing. I think whoever invented those thought it was, you could say people had extra ammo and they looked really tidy on a duty belt,
That's about it.
Yeah. So that was about it.
So for people listening, when he says dump pouch, we're not referring to the large dump pouch. Typically people have it about 7 o'clock on their belts. We're talking about, it's similar. It looks almost like a really small mag pouch with a snap on it. And it carries a single column of 6 rounds of whatever your chosen ammo. Two of them side by side, held on with a snap upside down.
Yeah, the ones we were issued were like in one piece on the bottom. And then if this is the front.
Oh, it pours out?
The back went over the top like a little magazine pouch with a flap.
Yep.
And then when you pop the snap, instead of taking your magazine out of the pouch, this part would flip forward and literally dump all the loose ammo into your hand.
Yeah.
In which you would juggle bullets around trying to get them in the gun and drop 2 or 3 of them while you're trying to get the gun loaded.
So speaking of exactly that, when it comes to efficient carrying a revolver and efficient reloading, what are some of the tips you have to people that are absolutely brand new to revolvers? What hand is the gun being held by? What side should the ammo be placed on the body?
So the classic revolver reload, if you were wearing a duty gun was on your strong side, like I'm a right-handed shooter. And then your ammo was just in front of the gun, between the gun and the belt buckle. That's where your speed loaders went, because you would have the gun in your shooting hand. You would pop the cylinder, transfer it into your weak hand, hit the ejector rod to dump the brass, and then you would flip the gun barrel down, what I call butt to belly, the butt of the gun to the belly, and then your speed loader goes in the gun. And the idea was you got the speed loader in the hand, making 6 bullets go into 6 small holes, because your strong hand has more dexterity. You'll see guys, especially with the modern push loaders like jet loaders, Safariland comps, things like that. There's guys like Caleb Giddings that will leave the gun in their strong hand, pop the cylinder out, eject the brass, and then load with their weak hand, kind of a revolver version of how most people load a semi-auto. So that, with the right loader and the right gun setup, can be very efficient and tends to be what people do in competition. And I know you've seen my training, but what I figured out over the years, very quickly carrying a snub nose 38 revolver as a backup gun, that the normal way to speed load a revolver, your full size duty gun, doesn't work with a snub nose, because the ejector rod's too short to efficiently get the brass out. So how I handle those guns is slightly different than how I handle full size guns. Mm-hmm. When I'm running speed loaders. And then for the very small guns, if I'm carrying a revolver, 5-shot revolver or something like that as a concealed carry gun, I'm typically carrying a speed strip instead of a speed loader. So there's a lot of people that would be thinking, man, this is way too arcane. I'm just going to give up on the idea. But if I have the ability to do show and tell, it's just not that tough.
So I'll interject there a little bit there, because this is why I'm here. Is, where I began my shooting and everything, and where I started was, just all semi-autos. Like revolvers just weren't a thing really anymore. You look at like the proficiency of getting a new shooter, especially civilians and things like that, from point A to point B, the quickest way possible. Semi-autos there, but I do think in that very beginning stages, a revolver is very useful for them. But I think the more you start to learn shooting, you tend to like veer off of that stuff because you find these better, more efficient ways through semi-auto platforms and stuff like that. And I have found that I have started to veer back towards revolvers and find some very specific uses. I still think going out to the range and me shooting, there is a hard separation in the performance. Like pure, like when I get out there and you're trying to, shoot for speed or shoot for accuracy, any of that stuff, I'm still very, very much better on the semi-auto. But like I was talking with Matt earlier, like a pure concealment standpoint on the revolver tends to be its best play in modern day terms. Do you have like any suggestions on like new people getting into revolvers? And that's where I'm at now with our brand and Taurus specifically. Is we all know like what the brand is, and what the price point is on the products. So that very much tends for, we gather up the majority of new shooters coming into the market. And it's wild when we go talk to instructors. And, my past job, we were working with instructors a lot and what they were pushing. And I talked to them and they're like, man, I got like half the people in my class coming in and they shoot Taurus because it's the first gun they buy, because it was the right price and it's, it's a pretty decent gun and they get it through. But how do you tell that specific customer, like, hey, you need a revolver over a semi-auto at this point in your career, because that's the differentiation point that I'm looking for to educate people. Like, where do they need, what purposes do they need to accomplish, and where that revolver fits into their life?
So I actually have carried and have owned a number of Taurus guns. My second gun, I had the rare privilege of doing basic training twice. So when you come out of basic and AIT and you got money burning hole in your pocket, my second centerfire handgun was a PT-99AF because I couldn't afford a Beretta and the military was going to the Beretta, and that's just as good as. And that was my high cap semi-auto for a lot of years until we went to Smith & Wesson's, and the main reason I abandoned it was the original one I had the 1911 safety.
Yep. Yeah, so they have a down safety.
It did not have the decocker. So it was literally kind of like a CZ75. You carried it cocked and locked, or you hand lowered the hammer. I was totally cool with that. But then when we got Smith & Wesson's, they're like a Beretta. The safety goes the other way. And the only reason I got rid of the gun was I didn't want my thumb to get confused, if that makes sense, because they were too close together, being double action, traditional double action guns. So I did, I had a Taurus, I think it's an 85, a little stainless 2-inch, kind of analogous to J-frame, carried a lot. Yeah.
Now that's the 856. That's the, it's transition to basically one of our flagship, models now. But
so as far as why would you do that? And a lot of people will tell me, well, it's so much easier to get new people to. That's not been my experience. Like I could tell you, I work with a lot of clients at a local level that just totally off book stuff. People call me up. Hey, I don't know what to buy. I've literally showed up to people's houses with a bag of guns, and we go through, we have the guns, we got dummy ammunition. I show them loading, unloading procedures. They can rack slides, things like that. I've had a number of them pick revolvers. And as of late, probably bad news for you, but Ruger LCRs have been a very popular. They have a better trigger out of the box than all of the Smith & Wesson J-frames that you can buy. And I've been a J-frame guy for a long time, but I have taken more than one shooter with specifically with LCRs, and in less than 50 rounds of live fire with teaching them to draw dry fire, quite a bit of dry fire, ball and dummy, utilizing skip loading, things like that. So less than 50 rounds total dry fire. I will have them hitting in the down zero on an IDPA target 100% of the time out to 10 yards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when we look at the concealed carry mission, would I prefer that they get better? Would I prefer that they, I would prefer everybody, be as well trained as I am, but that's like not a reality. But for that person's mission, now they got a gun. They have an idea of what carry ammo should look like. They have an idea of what practice ammo looks like. They have a method of practice. They have a very, very efficient way to dry fire, particularly if you put a laser grip on a revolver. Now you got a built-in SIRT gun. So you can utilize it as a laser training tool. So with the simplicity of the revolver, and I'm not talking about reloads, things like that. I'm talking about pulling the gun, shooting the gun, hitting something.
Yep, I agree.
I find that the revolver is as easy as, and perhaps easier than a lot of the semi-autos out there. And it is easier for people who are non-dedicated shooters to maintain a long-term training regimen of things like dry fire. In my observation. Yeah, I know that's kind of a niche observation. But I was very excited to learn about that, probably the very gun you held up. I believe that's the 3-inch 6-shooter, is it not?
Yeah, it's not the cool new executive grade. But
no, you kind of held it up for a minute, but is it a 6-shot 3-inch with a bobbed hammer?
Yeah. Okay. No bobbed hammer on this one, but our new one is the bobbed hammer one. I haven't got to get my hands on one yet. They sold too damn fast. So
yeah, the hammer being blued, I had trouble picking it up when you But a gun like that, you got 3 inches. You got a full length ejector rod. Reloads are easy. Good sight radius, and then I know it's 3-inch. Nominal. Yeah. But if you take into account what most people don't know about revolvers and semi-autos is they measure a semi-auto barrel all the way back to the breech face. Well, they only have a revolver barrel back to the front of the cylinder. So the functional length of a 3-inch revolver barrel is equivalent to like a 4.5 inch semi-auto barrel because of how they measure the barrel. So out of a 3-inch 38 revolver, you got really good ballistic efficiency. I do a lot of ballistic gel tests, and there's bullets out of 2 inches and the 1 7/8 Smith & Wessons that don't, like hollow points don't expand. But you get a gun like that with a 3-inch barrel, something like a Gold Dot, something like a Remington lead semi-wad cutter hollow point, they expand very well, and they're very efficient as a self-defense load.
Yeah. And so, this is where I think, and this has been my church carry gun. I carry it in an Enigma, the Filster Enigma. And I was telling him, I was like, I'm a pretty slender guy, I wear pearl snap shirts all the freaking time. So they're pretty thin and, tucked in, good to go. You can hide that thing so well. And then that was like my pathway because normally my 90% carry gun is a big full-size gun. I just what I normally carry every day. But I kept finding these like little instances where I was like, I still want to be carrying a gun every day, making sure I'm participating in that and doing that. And I found the revolver to be this very easy segment. But with the introduction of like micro compacts, because I think during the single stack craze, it was like, you had 6, 7, or 8 round mags, right? And that's basically a revolver, so you're taking your pick there, what you like. But now with micro compacts, I mean, you're getting, hell, our micro compacts 11 plus 1. It's ridiculous. It's tiny. And so then I started trying to figure out, all right, the comparison of the ease of carry versus performance. Of course, I could shoot still a micro compact a little better because I can throw a red dot on it and have lots of ammo and all that stuff. But I still found them to be a lot harder to conceal because of its general shape and stuff. So, but I still had, certain instances where I like to use that. And so I started looking, all right, for Taurus brand specifically, and you bring up like the LCR, and I was like, and I look at Taurus's, array of products that we've got going and what like our goals are to get. I want everybody to have a gun. And I want them to have multiple guns and understand their uses and stuff. And it's not just, I was always in this mindset of like, everybody asked me like, what do you recommend? I'm like, big ass gun with a dot, and you're good to go. And I finally started to realize like that isn't, and there's a lot of situations and needs that people need in it. And I looked at the Taurus brand. I'm still very new here. It's 4 months. I just came over here, and Brett, our CEO, has been on this podcast before too, and talked. But we kind of realized and looked at Taurus, and everything is built in-house. Coatings, the MIM tooling, everything. So the capabilities to produce a well-priced gun is there. And we look at it as like, all right, now if we're listening to people like you and Matt and the shooters out in the industry and taking what y'all like and what your knowledge is and start putting them into our product development schemes of like, that doesn't add any cost onto our guns. If we start the product development process from the beginning with these things in mind and start to change. And so that's what, we've been trying to push for and learn and everything. And I bring up this point and people ask me now, like what I recommend. And I always recommend, I'm like, all right, I like having a revolver, some type of short revolver for ultra deep concealment. I like having a micro compact. So my point being is like, I started recommending people like I thought the micro compact was a good bridge between, performance and ultra deep concealment. And then having a nice full size gun to, I think it's a jack of all trades, that 15 round 4-inch barrel type of gun. And I started looking at like the prices I would recommend. And, I always had people, they'd always recommend $3,000 guns or $1,200 guns, all this stuff. And I live in Eastern Oklahoma, and people would gawk at that stuff, And then I started getting out, I was like, that's 90% of the freaking gun market, of like what's going out there. And I looked at like those 3 guns of like what I recommend that you kind of need, whatever brand it is and stuff. And I looked at Taurus's and I was like, all right, they're pretty good guns. I know they're coming through. Our rates are doing a lot better on, QC and all that stuff. And, you can buy an 856. Let's just take Academy Sports Outdoors out of the South. You can buy a 856 38 special for $329 and a GX4 micro compact for $350. I put you at $680, where the LCR is $590 sitting on the shelf. Mm-hmm. So for $100 more, you get an extra gun and 2 very specific needs there. And I was like, all right, that's something there. And so I threw in a G3, a full size G3, and we're at $1,000 total cost to have that array to get you through just about every need that you might have. And from a handgun standpoint, and I think for just like a civilian style care, because I worked a lot with the law enforcement sales side of it and getting that out there, and traveled around and trained and did all that stuff at my past job, and that's a whole nother market. And then I've looked at the sheer numbers of what Smith & Wesson and Ruger and Taurus and everybody sells to the general public, and it is massive numbers, massive. And like trying to focus on like getting those people educated and trained up to know what they need to buy and get through that day-to-day carry life. And you see this like resurgence of revolvers in the market. I think y'all probably felt it too, and seen it.
What are you talking about? I know. I've had this forever.
It's like, dude, Matt, I would have never in my life would have thought like 3 or 4 years ago, like listening to like, I remember listening to podcasts talking about carrying a 2011 appendix carry with a weapon light and dot and mags and stuff. And now like we're talking 6-shot revolvers, and their purpose. And I think that group of people, you've watched shooters just get better and better and better over the last few years. And I always compare this because I'm a competitive shooter too. And I remember like, when I was a B class carry optic shooter, I would go in and it wasn't that competitive in that class, in USPSA. Now, for the love of God, like a B-class shooter is like mopping up. You can't hardly even compete in the division anymore. It's gotten like that group of shooters has gotten so good. And I think those people, and Caleb Giddings has this, you mentioned his name. I've been talking with him a little bit about these topics. Is like his little U curve. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that of like people's use for a revolver. I think the general like shooter crowd is on that path.
Yep.
Because I was like, just a few years ago, revolvers weren't that popular. You could tell by sales, and you're looking at pure analytics and things like that. And now you're watching this like all through gun media and all that stuff. It's like this huge resurgence in it. And I think it's because that group of B-class shooters that got really good, you know, they only were interested in semi-autos, and now they're starting to figure out those needs that revolver fills. And you're just seeing all those people start to buy in guns, and they're influencers, every single one of them. And that, you know, their family members and everything, they called them for advice on buying guns. And it bleeds over. And, you know, I wish I would have been smart enough to see it back, 4 years ago. But it's been an interesting topic. But I mean, where do you see revolvers going from here? Because like I look at it from a pure novice standpoint of like, my God, I can't tell. I can't tell the difference between a Security 6 and what's being made now. You know, it looks like a wood grip and some holes on it. So I really want to know, because like I see like R856 and stuff like that. I'm starting to realize some of the differences, and I see the benefits of the LCR and what that brings. But I mean, where does it go from here?
I think you're going to see more. Like, I'm surprised Ruger hasn't come out with like a K-frame size 6-shot.
Yeah.
38 357 Magnum LCR,
3-inch,
3 or 4 inch, something analogous to the K-frame Smith & Wesson size gun. I'm surprised that it hadn't happened yet. Those I think those are a very popular gun. That 856 that you guys have, I think, with a variety of models off of that could be a very popular thing to have. And then people like yourself, when I get questions like that all the time. Well, why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
So places where I see revolvers still shine real well and compare as well or better in the job to a semi-auto is like something I'm a big fan of is 22 caliber revolvers. And if you remember, during the great 22 ammo drought a few years ago, most of your semi-autos are very picky about what kind of ammo that they run through them. Well, my 22 revolvers, I could run short, long rifle, CB caps. If it chambers and it goes pop, it works. So I will use 22 revolvers, one, because they're just fun, but then you get more trigger pulls for the amount of money that you have. And then the lack of blast, lack of recoil, I call it a ballistic dry fire. So you get no recoil, but then you still, you get feedback on the target, right?
Yeah.
So I will use it for that. I'll use them for fun guns. And I think the fun aspect of guns, even when we're talking about combative study, is strongly overlooked by way too many people. It's fun,
I agree. And I put this back on a little bit on your mental health too. Because having fun at the range I find I get very aggravated and very short with people. And I realize I haven't been on the range in like 4 weeks or something like that. And I realize like going to the range and just shooting or hanging out with like-minded people on the guns and shooting really clears my head and is like really good for me. So always now I try to take time. And I think people like pass over that issue quite a bit of like, it can just be fun. We can't just go goof off and mag dump if we want to, because we're taking care of ourselves and our own health in that standpoint and just relieving some freaking stress, So that's a key part of it. I'm glad you bring that up, but just the pure fun aspect. I think we get really too serious sometimes, and it is a serious thing, defensive carry and what we do on that. And but I said, let's face it, like 90% of the gun buyers out there, man, it is fun. It's just fun for them. It's getting their family together. It's going to the range.
If you take the fun away, they're just not going to stick with it.
It's like going to the dentist then, you don't want to do it, you got to, but you don't want to do it. So.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that aspect is heavily overlooked by a lot of people that just poo-poo the idea of it. So 22s, I think revolvers in many ways trump semi-autos just because of the utility. And then double action revolvers have some unique handling attributes that I utilize to get people over. As an instructor, I use it as an instruction tool. Like my state academy here teaches and forces people in the academy to pin the trigger. So they don't teach reset during recoil. They teach pinning the trigger. What that typically leave the academy with is a horrible training scar and marksmanship issues that they have been ingrained through practice at the state academy. So then I have to fix that. Being able to just dry fire the gun all the way back, all the way forward, all the way back, all the way forward, getting them back in tune with running that trigger smoothly is an important thing. Get them past pinning that trigger is an important thing. And then I also find it's kind of like weightlifting for your trigger finger. I've got a Mosin Nagant revolver that I have in my bag that I've had people like shooting their gun and they're like, man, my trigger sucks. And I'll hand them that. Here, dry fire this a few times because it's got like a 25-pound trigger pull, right? And you dry fire that and you're like, holy shit. Well, then you pick up your gun and it magically has a better trigger. But if you can manage something like a snub revolver trigger, you can, in my opinion, shoot anything well as far as managing a trigger. So some of the shooting drills that I utilize double action revolvers for, dry fire, ball and dummy, skip loading, things like that. These are things that I utilize to fix people's shooting issues. I utilize it even though they're a semi-auto shooter, I utilize it as a tool to fix some of their shooting issues like pre-ignition push, flinching, pinning the trigger, some of these things that people can have a real problem with. And then, so I also use them for deep concealment guns. What you found, Cody, is that they kind of have more of that bar of soap shape in the grip instead of like a small brick shape. And they're much more forgiving of printing. And then also the shape of the gun tends to be more comfortable. When you wear it inside the waistband, things like that, it just is more comfortable. And then specialty use, ankle carry and pocket carry. Revolvers absolutely shine, and they have a number of tremendous advantages over semi-autos in that mode. And even in the small micro semi-autos, we talked earlier about reliability in pistols. What I find is full-size service guns, say you take a Glock 17 or a SIG 226 or some sort of semi-auto military-grade service semi-auto, and you compare it to what we used to carry, like a Smith & Wesson K-frame, Smith & Wesson L-frame, and you put them in similar circumstances, like what's so used to be really common to have like a pistol shooting weekend where you go shoot 1,000 rounds, 1,200 rounds. Any service grade semi-auto will run right through that. Whereas with a revolver, you're going to have to clean the hell out of it to keep it running. It's probably going to choke on you. But when you start shrinking the guns, when you get like a snub 38, like a J-frame, something like that size that fits in a pocket, and you start comparing them to some of the other guns that will fit in a pocket, those small semi-autos are not nearly as reliable in my observation. On top of, we're talking about range reliability. In real life, what I've noticed, and I've talked to other people about, like Claude Werner, tactical professor, who's a true researcher on stuff like this. In real life, semi-autos in real fights are less reliable than they are at the range. Poor grip, clothing interference, somebody grabbing your gun, things like that manifest themselves big time. And we see that in like badge cam videos, surveillance videos, where somebody gets a couple of rounds off and gets a stovepipe or something like that. We see that a lot with semi-auto pistols. And that's with service size guns. When you shrink the gun, they're much less forgiving of poor grip. You didn't pick the right ammo. The lube in the gun is dried up, things like that. So pulling the gun and firing the gun and being able to get all of the rounds out of the gun if you need them, I think is much more important than a theoretical, well, I can reload this thing faster. What I see in pocket-sized semi-autos is very commonly you get one round in a stovepipe. When you shoot the gun in the manner in which it's been carried. And what do I mean by that? Most people will have some sort of premium ammo in their gun, jacket, hollow point, something like that. Let's say you carry a 9mm and you've got a Gold Dot or HST in it. You go to the range, especially now when it's hard to get, you unload the gun, you set your carry ammo aside, you load the gun with your full metal jacket, you shoot whatever it is that you're going to shoot for drills, practice, etc., and then you clean the gun or you reload the gun and with your carry ammo. That's what most people do. What we find with pocket-sized semi-autos is if you pull it out of the holster, pull it out of the pocket, and shoot it with your carry ammo without manipulating the gun. I know a lot of people that have a problem consistently of one round in a stovepipe because they haven't lubed the gun in a week or two. It's got dust bunnies from being carried in a pocket or an ankle or something like that. So if they pull the gun just like they would in a real fight, they're consistently getting one round in a stovepipe that they have to fix. I would submit to you that the theoretical capacity of that semi-auto is moot compared to something like a snub 38 or a 327 where you got 5 or 6 shots and they are going to work and consistently work. So, that's the type of thing we see when we look at this problem. We apply some real world observation to it.
Yeah. All right, so I've got something to that, but I'm going to ask this one thing just to wrap up that future of revolvers thing. Because I've watched performance increases on pistols and what's happening on the semi-auto side. Are red dots and comps a thing on revolvers? Is that something 10 years from now? Are all revolvers going to be optic ready in a comp?
So comps were a thing on revolvers far before they were a thing on semi-autos. Mm-hmm. And if you're talking about compensatory use of muzzle gas or the gas that is generated from the gunpowder, things like magna-porting have been around decades longer than semi-autos ever had compensators or porting. And then you look at they aren't super they're not super common, but something like a K-frame or an L-frame carry comp that Smith & Wesson has done, those have been very popular.
We do a bunch on our 44 mags with the porting on the front, and things like that.
I think if somebody came out with a muzzle device that kind of screwed on and off, analogous to what we see on semi-autos, let's say I want to carry a comp for the range, I want to carry a comp for just general shooting, but you know what? I don't like the blast of it for when I'm carrying it, so I can switch it out with a non-ported muzzle weight of some sort. I think that would be something people buy. I think it is easier when you look at the issues involved. It would be easier to drop an optic on a revolver than it is on a semi-auto. And if we go way back, there were people putting scopes on Magnum revolvers for hunting in the 50s. So I think when you get down to the technical, because wire slide mounted optics, why did it take such a time to so long to take off? Because you have the issues of how many G forces are being involved.
Reciprocating slide.
You got reciprocating slide. Well, then if you put too much mass on the slide, now you alter the slide function and your timing on the gun. Maybe you induce feeding issues.
Or the optic manufacturers just want to come up with their own footprint with every single optic.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw all the optic guys on the bus there, man.
Well, you've Cody, you've shot compensated, optic sighted semi-auto pistols. Have you ever noticed any of those having function issues with ammo? Like you put a comp on it, you put a dot on it, and now maybe it doesn't run ammunition that doesn't have enough recoil impulse.
And that's the thing, and it is weird, and that's why I think major manufacturers, and you're just starting to see them get into that because, I just had this conversation with another rep. We're out filming TV shows from another Turkish company or something like that. And we were talking about that because he was like, all right, I think, military law enforcement, dictates like whatever the civilians do, like performance stuff like that. I was like, man, I was like, I don't know, competitive shooters, they put dots and comps on their guns, and then it takes a long time. It usually looks goofy as hell, but when I look at it, like they usually tune their ammo, and it's that. But once a major manufacturer does it, it meets all those standards. They usually eliminate a lot of. Usually don't get that performance increase, of like a very tuned thing. But I mean, you look at some of the guns coming with a comp right from the factory nowadays, and if you don't make them or they're damn near 100% reliable, you're gonna catch hell for it. So I feel like we're starting to figure things out, just about, all the guns that are coming optic ready now. You can drop just about whatever optic you want on it. It's still going to run good. So I think we're in that beginning phase of that stuff for major manufacturers taking on board and putting that stuff through. And
my point of asking that was, guess what revolvers are not prone to.
Exactly.
You put a comp on it, it doesn't change the function.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
On it doesn't change the function.
Mm-hmm.
Another advantage that I note is, with like shooting B8s at the 25 has really taken off again lately. And
right.
I see guys, they'll be shooting, I shot a 98, I shot a 99. Rarely I get 100. Matt, most of the guys that are really hitting B8s with that kind of accuracy at those distances, what kind of guns are they using?
2011s.
Staccatos, yeah. Joe Chambers. So you got what, a $3,000 gun with like $400 worth of optic on it.
Yeah.
That level of accuracy used to be something we took for granted in the 70s. You could pick up a Smith & Wesson K-frame base model 15, dial in your sights, load it with good Winchester Remington target grade wad cutters, and shoot groups that small or smaller.
And you look at like Justin Dial, he came out and participated in some riders events with me and stuff. And like, yeah, it takes him a little while to get him with the semi-autos. Every time he picks up a revolver, he shoots a freaking 100, It's just, he makes it that easy at that point. And yeah, those guns are a tenth of the price of a staccato or anything like that. It's crazy.
I have thought about doing what Caleb's doing, because I've got a couple of guns that I could easily drop. Like I got an extra Aimpoint T1 laying around, and I put it on a revolver. And there are still a couple of guys around here who was like, one of the guys that I used to work with in my original job was an armorer for the Air Force. Well, what did the Air Force guys carry back in the day? Model 15 Smith & Wessons. Man, they can do a trigger job. It would be easy for me to come up with a sub $500 revolver and then drop an aim point on it, and then drop something like Federal Gold Medal Match in the gun and start shooting B8s at the 25-yard line. And it's just, it's the easy button. You can get some really extreme accuracy out of that.
Yeah. And that's where I think is in what like I said, I'm a shooter, and I'm now immersed in this world of entry level pistols, that have a lot of potential and good in those. And I want to get like all that performance of what we're talking about and get like those people interested in it, and that, because that influences a ton of new shooters 10 years from now, and hopefully the PNS podcast has 10 times the amount of followers by then, or even more, like people just super interested in this stuff. And, I think that's a key point on the revolvers right there, is like, if we can like continue to start pushing like its key aspects, because I still think it's a very viable carry aspect. And this is what I was getting to, is like 4 years ago, I didn't own a revolver, I was like, I don't know why I would, and then now I'm to the point of like, all right, they're still pretty viable, even though like technology on, semi-autos have come so far. The performance on semi-autos have come so far, and you alluded to it, as like, we're still trying to get that type of accuracy out of semi-auto to this day. And you're like, in the 70s, we had that right out of the box, it's crazy to think. I think
that was the expectation too. Like if you got a revolver that didn't perform to that level, that you couldn't shoot with good ammo, like target wide cutters, things like that. But if your gun couldn't shoot to that level, there was something wrong with the gun.
Yeah. Yep.
That was an aberration that the guns didn't shoot. And so when I was a baby cop, and all I had with me to win a fight was a 4-inch 357 revolver. I had a snub nose 38 on my ankle, and we had a rusty Remington 870 in the car with 4 rounds of number 4 buck. That's the tools that I had. So being a rifle guy and growing up with my dad, who's military, he was a rifle guy. I'm like, man, I better get good at shooting at distance. Well, the one of the nice things about a 357 Magnum revolver is if you are up to the task, you can hit a man-sized target rather easily out to 200 yards with a gun like that. I got to the point in rollover prone. If I could hit the ground, go prone, and have the gun extended, and you basically utilizing your bicep as a stock like you would on a rifle, I would cock it into single action and then fire from there. There was a particular duty load that we were issued at the time. I could shoot a 6-inch group at 100 yards.
That's crazy, isn't it? And
I've owned AKs that don't shoot that good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Well, we've got our hunting line of revolvers like that, the Raging Hunting series, the Raging Hunter. And yeah, I mean, I've gotten that as a truck gun now. It's like, man, it's freaking, this is way shorter than my 300 Blackout with a folding stop. And the 460, you're getting 2,100 foot-pounds of energy out of it. I'm like, I can put a scout scope or a dot on it and get some distance out of it. It's been a very useful tool. I guess I would keep finding these other revolvers that I never kind of thought to input into my life there. And now it's really kind of rounded out, I think, my shooting abilities. Still got a lot of work to do, and I plan to go shoot with Caleb Giddings a little bit to start figuring that side of it out. But any recommendations on, like, I guess, say we got a new shooter coming in and the techniques? Because I think a lot of the times when you look, even the manufacturer side, and we push it too, of like shooting techniques on grip and handling and reloading, there's not a whole lot of revolver stuff out there anymore. I've searched across a couple of the major manufacturers' websites and some of YouTube and stuff, and it is with semi-autos, it's just like, my God, everything you scroll through on Instagram is that, right? Like nothing on revolvers. And when I do, it's like people spinning the freaking cylinder and slapping it over and, just ridiculous stuff. And so, I mean, where do people go, or what do you recommend to get that type of training on the revolver side? So
there aren't a lot of people offering that anymore. Daryl Bolke, Wayne Dobbs, a few other guys. I know Caleb has a class coming up in Dallas in December that I saw him post. I will do them on demand, and I've had a few that I have set up that if somebody's looking for a formal revolver course, you just kind of got to shop around a little bit. But as far as like videos, I don't know. Maybe it's something. Maybe primary and secondary needs to have some videos. But
I mean, like in August.
Yeah, right.
I would think so. Mas Ayub has some pretty good videos on utilizing things like speed strips and that sort of thing. I don't do the same reloads that Moss does, but it's still good information. And Michael Bethencourt, he does he's got a pretty good tutorial. The last I Googled his stuff, he's got a pretty good tutorial online where this showing how he reloads if he leaves it in a strong hand, utilizes his weak hand for a reload. And he's got one on if he's going to do the classic revolver, change hands, dump the brass, speed loader type of thing. So the classic service revolver stuff isn't that tough to find. So it still holds up for full-size guns like that. And, what I'm talking about is like that 3-inch you've got or bigger guns, 4-inch service size revolvers. But there you can get on YouTube, and there is an Indiana State Police revolver speed loader tutorial that was made. It was a training film for cops in 1978 or something like that. I think it's cool. You can still find some of this retro.
That's cool. I know, right?
Because, it still holds up. And then, quite frankly, you have to look through some of his stuff, but Jerry Michalek has got some pretty decent stuff on grip, things like that. So
yeah, that was something, man. I felt like I was on another world trying to figure out how to grip that thing. So I'm like, because I got like the Scott Jedlinski grip too, you know, with the relaxed thumbs high up. And so I was like, man, I don't feel like Ricky Bobby, like not knowing what to do with my thumbs when I.
So I used to think I was a little jacked up because I got fairly good sized hands, and for what, and I know people worry about it, and it was a worry when we transitioned from revolvers to semi-auto. There were people that got bit, but the old school thumb over the back of the hand.
Yeah.
That's how I run a revolver, particularly small revolvers, because I got a lot of hand, a little bit of gun. It wants to squirm around. Well, what I can do with that hand is crush grip my shooting hand really hard. Gun doesn't move. I know Matt might remember that picture Tamara Keel got of me. I was showing that grip and recoil control at TacCon 2 years ago. She caught the muzzle blast. She caught the bullet leaving the gun, and the gun is absolutely dead flat, hasn't moved a bit. So I used to think I was kind of dumb for doing that. And then I was paying attention to videos, and that's how Jerry Michalek runs a revolver with that same grip. And I've since had the opportunity to meet with him and kind of hang out at his range and talk shop with him. And he's arguably the demigod of revolvers.
Yeah, so, I would agree. Yeah.
You know, I realized I wasn't as big a soup sandwich as I thought I was. If
always somebody, man.
Jerry Michalek.
So you're saying roughly this ish?
Yeah, mine would be something like that.
Looks like you're lower. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try it out.
Is there anything to like?
Oh, go ahead.
Is there anything to like the Chiappa Rhino with the low bore thing?
Oh, man, they tend
I'm a newbie, right? So
remember when I was talking about the insides look like clockwork and they're kind of fiddly? The Chiappa is even more so because of how they had to make the bottom one shoot on the guts on those things are horrifying to look at if you had to work on them. And then all of the samples that I have tried have horrible triggers.
Really?
Just awful, gritty, etc. I know Caleb's got
like a bullpup.
Yeah, Caleb's got one that he's been shooting. He likes it. I think people that buy them go for the look. You know, they're kind of futuristic. The Chiappa looks to me kind of like that gun they had on Blade Runner. Harrison was carrying a Blade Runner. I will tell you, for marketing stuff for you guys' guns, I know it's a pain in the ass, but if you look at revolvers with vent ribs have always been cool. There's a reason why Chiappa's doing it. There's a reason why the Colt Python has that. My first handgun was an H&R model 999 Sportsman 22 9-shot double action revolver. And the two cool things for me about that gun was it broke like a British Webley.
Oh, that's cool.
And it had a vent rib barrel like a Colt Python.
Interesting.
I think for marketing, just those aspects of that gun sold that gun for a lot of people. You know, style, whether we like it or not, style's a thing.
I had this because like we had the G3 series come out, man, like people would hate on that gun. And I have like a set of standards that I go out and I shoot like Scott's black belt standards and stuff like that. And I went and bought just a stock G3 semi-auto off the shelf for like $300. Didn't even wait for like my employee pricing or anything. It was like $300, so it's affordable. Bought it. It hit the standards, whatever, you know, and got it. So I was like, all right, it's there. Post pictures of it. Everyone's like, dude, that thing's butt ugly. I sent the thing to freaking Boresight and had Boresight do it up. All it is a freaking stipple job, you know, and then I post a picture and people are like losing their minds over it because they love that. I mean, literally we had like, 200 comments on a picture with that gun. And I was like, I don't understand. It's just the simplest little things. Like you said, a vent rib would change the the buying mood of somebody instantly. It drives me a little crazy because I'm a little bit of a utilitarian with these things now, and I mean, I understand, the thing's you got to be attracted to it, to spend your money on it. So whether that's looks or performance. So.
Yeah, I think that as far as marketing goes, like I'm totally not a fan of Kimber's, but man, they sell a lot of guns because they sell pretty guns. I would prefer that they sell pretty guns at work, but they sell a lot of guns that are pretty.
Yeah. Yep. So, and I mean, that's a boat we're in. And I guess I had a couple of these conversations with people because I think we get caught up a little bit into like, we've been in this industry and we've shot a lot. So we get so like minute on these things, but stepping back and looking at it like unbiased and like I said, the 90% of the population is buying guns. And what are they looking for? They want something that works. That
not the same cool. Stuff we are.
And not at all, man. They don't care about half of that stuff. And this is a funny it's hilarious. So I came over to Taurus and did my G3, put my mod light and 509 on it, and a comp on it and stuff. And when I was at Walther, like if I would have posted a PDP with like an O light and a I don't know, some cheap freaking red dot on it, I'd be ridiculed, right? And I posted a picture of my mod light, Taurus and stuff. Dude, I got ridiculed for having high end stuff on my gun. Like, no lie.
Can't win.
It was like this complete opposite world.
Can't
I was like,
win.
what is going on? So, but they're $400 weapon light on a $300 gun.
Yeah.
And,
well, actually, that was one of the first. As soon as I got my mod light, that was one of the first guns I put it on. Was a G3 to take a picture, and the comments were interesting.
Oh, they're interesting. Yeah. Like I said, I go out and hit a 3.2 drill and 1.7, and like it still does its job fine. But
well, considering your shooting background and the amount that you shoot, it's going to be very interesting to hear what your thoughts are down the road, shooting the same gun. And
and I will say that, and this has been a different, because there's such a wide array. Like I said, I've been like, now I'm shooting revolvers and I'm shooting micro compacts and I'm shooting full, I didn't have that access before, and so now I've realized like my guns are not taking that much of a beating anymore.
Yes.
When I'm out on the range, because my time is split pretty evenly amongst those things to try to, get efficient on a couple different platforms. And, I still, like I said, my go-to is a full-size gun, but it's not taking the beating as, other guns that I shoot normally, So that is something I've kind of taken into effect, of like having that good array of pistols that, you can rely on in different situations and scenarios and stuff. So,
well, I think there's a lot of value with having that array. And I actually had this conversation with a buddy within the last week. Primarily, I'm a semi-auto guy. On duty, I'm carrying a semi-auto. Yeah, that's just what I do. The amount of time I'm spending with revolvers has increased dramatically because the trigger press on the double action is considerably, well, it's different compared to when I'm shooting my staccato, which I carry on duty. Mm-hmm. So just like what Chuck said, this is kind of a workout for my trigger finger, which is awesome. The irons on this, well, when I shoot my red dot, I'm seeing more positive results with these irons. When I'm pressing the trigger on this, I'm seeing positive results with the staccato. So they kind of work with each other, and they're supporting each other as a system. Yeah. And it's really, really cool. And I think revolvers, for me, I ignored them for a long time and then realized, wait a minute, there might be something here. And then to really test them out and try them out, and then realize there's some serious value here. Mm-hmm. It's been a revelation. And I'm glad I started to listen to people like Chuck and Daryl and Cecil and people like that, because my overall performance with my carry guns have improved because of my dry fire and because of shooting these.
Yep. And like I said, I carry more now because, like I said, there are situations, especially
Yeah.
where I'm at, where it's 100 degrees, 100% humidity, and you get lazy sometimes. And, and like, especially with the full size gun, I was like, oh my God, I have to go put pants on or shirt, I can conceal pretty well and stuff. And dude, like I said, I was like, this thing in an Enigma, I was like in whatever shorts with no belt on and a tank top, it's redneck. So, nothing, no issues whatsoever. And I was like, all right, it's super easy. I don't even notice it. So there was something to that. I was like, now I'm not being lazy or leaving it in the trunk or anything like that. It's like, it's on me all the time now. So, it's been a pretty effective, kind of realization,
It really has.
So one of the things I'll throw out as far as revolver history, one of my mentors, name is Keith Jones. He did a ridiculous amount of time as a copper in Metro Indianapolis, and he was a cop all during. Also saw heavy combat in Vietnam. Very experienced dude. Numerous officer-involved shootings. He's a no shit gunfighter. So during the time when cops are still carrying revolvers, he decided, you know what I'm going to do? I think we need to get 9 mils, get the double stack guns, so we'll have that advantage. I'm going to do a study, and I'll show all these cops that, we had some bad outcome because they were carrying a revolver, and that way the brass will have to, admit that we need to get semi-auto. So I forget the exact numbers. I know we went back 20 years, and it was 198 gunfights. 198, 197, something like that. And he found one dude that ever had to reload. So this was 6-shooter gunfights back in the day. And what they found was they were resolving that problem if they could. So another thing I'll take from Tom Gibbons is he commonly says the number one, had a long day. The number one reason for needing to reload is missing. And then for what you're finding, what a lot of people find is carrying a gun is a pain in the ass. So I commonly see people going without a gun because it's just a pain in the ass. Or, I'm not going to wear my normal, I'm on vacation, whatever, being able to find guns that fit into your clothing, into your lifestyle. They are comfortable to carry. They are kind of transparent to carry, and that they really don't affect your life. And I know people will argue against that. And I was one of those people. And I like to carry as capable a gun as I can. However, at what point do we, if I'm not carrying a full-size semi-auto with 2 reloads, then, I'm not taking it seriously. Well, I could argue if you're not, wearing your plate carrier and you have your carbine at low ready, you're not taking it seriously. How much more tactical are you than the other guy? It's almost like this penis measuring contest, if you will. I could tell you that I know a dude who spent massive amounts of time overseas in war zones that retired out of the CIA after over 30 years of service. And when he is CONUS still, he's carrying a snub revolver. So you got a guy like Claude Warner who retired. He's used to be a special forces guy. He used to be the chief instructor for the elite Rogers Shooting School, Georgia champion IDPA guy. Most of the time carrying some kind of revolver, very, very commonly. Or I think for both comfort and to tweak the internet, he's been known to carry a 22 very, very, pretty regularly. But those guys they're very proficient with what they're carrying, and they're armed all the time. The time. And they can do so without it being a real pain in the ass. So I think, what you're finding with the adding a revolver to your carry battery, as it were, can be something that is a very useful adjunct. And then what I try to get across to people is there are envelopes of revolver size that will do things for you that semi-autos won't. Maybe it's concealability. Maybe it is use as a training tool, or, you were talking about the hunting guns. I still have my Security 6 4-inch 357 revolver. depending on what ammo I'm loading into that gun, I can use it for people. I can use it for deer. I can use it for black bear. I can use it for rabbit hunting, just by changing. I can use it for target shooting just by changing ammunition.
That's why I switched to this. This is the 357. This is the 605, but 5-shot on this one. But I did it for the same things. I use it as I carry it in a Hill People Gear kit bag, and and I can carry it to church. It's pretty versatile.
Yeah. So with that gun right there, let's say that's going to be your church gun, and you've got like 135 grain to snub nose gold dots loaded in it. You're set as an anti-personnel load. But now let's say you're going to go backpacking, and you're like, what, we're going to be in black bear country, and you drop something like a 180 grain hard nose flat point, or a hard cast flat point in that gun. You'd be able to shoot through the biggest bear that ever existed.
And I actually carry the rat shot too, like now for snake shot for when I'm fishing. Like I'll keep, I've got an array of, like, just like you're saying, just I can change the function of the gun with the round, right? Normally on a semi-auto, you couldn't really do that. I was having to either change the gun or change the caliber completely, so which meant changing the gun. And with this one, 38, 357, whatever, rat shot, hard nose, whatever I wanted to run through it is there. So I think that's something like us from a manufacturer standpoint, really need to get the point across a lot quicker, and better for new shooters getting into it. And that's what I've been trying to tell people and recommend is like, I'm amongst a lot of shooters. And I think just like we talked about, I think we get into our own little world about, what shooting should be, right? You should carry this big old gun and a dot and a light and stuff. And like I said, the average guy, like I said, we need to get them through that shooting career and into that stuff. But like, how do they get there? If you tell them right off the bat, they need all that, they need $2,000 worth of equipment and stuff like that, you might as well be a hunter in Europe, or you got to own friggin' an estate to be able to go hunting. It's ridiculous. That's not where we're at in this country. Like, you should be able to go out and buy, like I said, a Taurus says you can buy your complete array of guns for $1,000. It's not going to take 4 months pay of salary, to go get into shooting and all that stuff. We'll make it as accessible as possible for shooters and responsible people to get into it and train. So, but I think the revolvers are now, you're seeing people get into them more and more and more. And it's been fun to watch. I know from a manufacturer standpoint and from an outsider view of like my journey in concealed carry. It's like I said, we all go through these phases, and I think we all follow a very similar path in our shooting careers of like getting into it we've all got our like cringeworthy crap that we put together in the beginning, I don't even like to mention some of the things that I've done, but and then you get into the snobby phase, and then you get into I'm a little bit more of a utilitarian now. And I used to look at people like that would say that, like, I don't care, just give me a gun, I'll go shoot. And I was like, what? How do you not care about like what optics you got and stock and grip on your AR, like all this stuff. And then now, like, I'm at that point. So it's just this like gradual increase in your shooting career. And I said, if we're getting like at Taurus, I said, we have that customer in the beginning stages, and it's like getting them educated and getting them the right guns at the right price. So.
Well, one of the things I've alluded to, sorry, I was kind of looking at the chat there, seeing what the questions were. Yeah. One of the reasons a few of the people that I have dealt with, like, shooting's not their thing. They're not going to be like recreational shooters. They're not really into it, not their thing, but they'll do it enough to maintain a level of proficiency. So, like the one guy with the revolver, less than 50 rounds live fire, all hits guaranteed inside to down zero, out to 10 yards. It's pretty good for concealed carry and for home defense. Well, I got him educated on what kind of practice ammo to buy, a variety of self-defense loads for that gun. He knows what to go shop for, and then, kind of got a little bit recreational with it because it's fun. So he's got a dry fire regimen, which is very easy to do. he can unload the gun, doesn't beat up the ammo, dry fire the gun. And the last I knew, he had bought snap caps for it to just because something people do. And if you're gonna be a dedicated dry fire person, that can help protect the firing pin. But so he's got a good dry fire regimen and maintains proficiency with minimal investment, minimal amounts of live fire. And then when he does do live fire, it basically proves the dry fire program. So if you look at a systems approach, and for the gun he ended up with a inside the waistband holster and a pocket holster, so he can change his mode of carry.
Nice.
So if you look at a systems approach, the gun, the ammo, the practice regimen, the carry methods, for that dude, a revolver was absolutely the best choice.
Yeah.
And I've had a number of clients that I've worked with and friends who have figured that out as well.
So can you talk a little bit about the pocket carry thing? And this is something I just kind of figured out because I didn't even know this was a thing, because I always had these issues during the wintertime for me with carrying my big gun, because I'd always wear usually when I'm working, I live out in the middle of nowhere, and but I usually, it's like a hoodie or something like that. And I usually wear like a wax cotton jacket or some kind of jacket over the top of that hoodie during the wintertime, and that gets me by. But like drawing your gun from that, there's a lot of crap in the way, and trying to get even appendix carry and stuff like that. And then I started watching all these videos of these pocket carry guys of just like the revolver in their outer pocket or whatever being. I mean, is that a viable way to carry a gun, in your opinion, with a revolver?
That's absolutely a viable way to carry a gun. And I know people who do that summer and winter. They will have a pocket gun if they're wearing like cargo shorts or whatever appropriate, pants that they have on for whatever they're doing. And access to the gun can be problematic. But if you are switched on and you see something developing, what you can do is have your hand on the gun.
Already on it, yeah. Now that's fast.
So that's very fast. Like I saw Bob Vogel did a video on that when he was talking. He shows pulling his Glock out, then he showed pulling his backup gun out of his pocket. And he's got a snub 38 in his pocket. I'm not Bob Vogel, but I can hit .6 from the beat to the first shot out of the pocket. That's a damn fast shot.
Yep.
So if you're shooting competition, let's say we had a new rule in, let's say you're going to shoot IDPA. We got a new rule, Cody, that you win the coin toss. So you get to start with your hand, your gun, grip established. Everybody else in the match has to start from surrender position. Are you going to take that advantage?
Oh yeah, I'm already a half second faster than everybody per stage without ever shooting the gun.
100% of the time you're going to take that advantage.
Yep.
So what a lot of people like is the convenience of it, the comfort of it. And then I've met people with medical conditions. Maybe they can't. Like I've met people that cannot physically carry appendix. I carried at the 3 o'clock, kind of 3:30 position, the classic, like the Jeff Cooper summer special inside the waistband. I carried like that for a couple of decades. I can't do it anymore because carrying a big gun inside the waistband in that method has kind of screwed my back up a little bit. I can't do it. So I know people that will carry pocket for, maybe they got a medical condition, that kind of thing. But what it does allow switched on people to do is have their grip already established and have an extraordinarily fast draw if it turns into a gunfight. And then what you alluded to with wintertime, I know more than a few people that will carry a big gun just like they normally do, some sort of semi-auto pistol, and then they will have a revolver in the outer coat pocket. I believe that's a very viable way to do business. Historical precedents. If you look at like a Fitz revolver, and I know Matt is familiar with those.
Oh yeah.
Most people misread why Fitz made the guns the way that he did. And they had a very specific mission. They were round butt, short barrel, bob hammer, and you've seen the cutaway trigger guard.
I'm looking at it right now.
This is gone. Well, why would anybody do something like that? Well, think about gentlemen's fashion back in like the teens and the 20s, 1920s. Gentlemen wore suits, right? And then when you went out, you would have an overcoat or a greatcoat that went over that in the winter. Cars were not heated. So you dressed for, most people in modern times, they dress just enough to survive going from the house to the car to the house.
Yeah.
Right? Back then, you could actually, cars really weren't well heated. So you would wear a gentleman's like an overcoat or a greatcoat. So Fitz had one in each pocket, and he wore gloves. So when you think about the access to the gun, pulling the gun out of the pocket, getting a gloved finger into the trigger guard, and shooting in a close range fight, for his very specific niche, it made total sense. But the overcoat pocket thing is a very, very old trick that goes back to the Derringer days. Original Derringer, 1R, not 2, Mr. Derringer, that invented the short little single shots. There was guys carrying those in overcoat pockets all the way back into the early 1800s.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I believe it's a very viable way of doing business.
Yeah. Now you see a lot of people like doing the whole, I don't know if it's just an IG thing or if it's a legitimate thing, but just shooting straight through your pocket. Would you rather just draw at that point?
It is possible. Obviously, you're shooting from probably retention distance. Your accuracy is going to be compromised. But like from a coat pocket, it is completely viable to shoot through a coat pocket. And you can do it with a semi-auto. You'll get one round, typically a stovepipe or something.
Yeah, you're done. Yeah.
Whereas with a revolver, you can get all your rounds off, typically. There's a caveat with that with Smith & Wessons with exposed hammers because they got that firing pin that sticks out of the hammer that can catch on stuff. But like a Centennial style revolver, bodyguard style revolver, ones without the hammer that have the firing, don't have the firing pin on the hammer, something with a bobbed hammer, it's going to work real well. I think it's better to get it out of the coat pocket to shoot, but it's viable if you can't.
Nice. Okay. And I get this because I have questions that roll in, and the questions that come through on the Taurus side, and then we're going out. Like I said, I'm down here at HQ, just drove in this morning from filming a show. We're going out to film a ton of different training videos and things like that because there's not a lot that Taurus has pushed out to their customers on that side of it. So we're going to be out here with Casey Subio and Jesse Harrison and some other people just to get some educational stuff out there, but I really didn't want to shoot too much of the revolver videos until I was really like sunk into that world and understood like semi-auto stuff. I can talk about that in my sleep and understand it and not get into any sticky boats or somebody's going to call bullshit on me. I think
I saw you on a Walther video recently, even with semi-autos.
Yeah, I think I'm probably still going to be in those for a little while. Yeah. So.
Have you guys discussed at all about the calibers, ballistics, advantages?
No. This is a thing too, because this is why I switched over to the 357, and I don't even know if it was a good thought or not. But
it's an option. It opens up your options.
I guess like my quick Google search, like how we find information nowadays. I was like, all right, 38 special versus 9mm, because I was like, all right, micro compact, and I had a 38 special at the time, and like I don't know, ballistics kind of showed first, 2 pages on Google was like 9mm is a clear winner on that. And so then I was like, all right, 9mm versus 357. And 357 a clear win. So I was like, all right, then I'm going to buy 357 because it's the same frame size. And I gave up a round though. I was 5-shot instead of 6-shot. And so is 38 special compared to 9mm? I mean, is that a thing? Because we make 9mm revolvers and 380 revolvers and stuff like that too. But
well, I think before we get into that, it's important to cover a very, very basic aspect of this. And what's the goal here? So if we're talking anti-personnel, there are essentially 3 ways to stop the bad guy. We have psychological, which we have no control over. We have a bleed out, which is essentially a timer. Depending on where the person's shot, They may bleed out faster. They may bleed out slower. That's whatever the size of the hole is and related bleeding. That's what you're looking at. Lastly, it's the switch, a CNS hit. So ultimately, what are these individual rounds going to do to a person? How is that person going to respond? Some people might get, well, actually, I'll leave this to Chuck. He has awesome testing under his belt, and I want to hear him talk.
Well, so depending on caliber, and then when you look at viable options for guns that are, I think, tactically equivalent. If you look at like a 5-shot air weight 38 revolver, one of the aluminum frames or something like that. Yeah, you can get them in 9mm. They're like the Ruger LCR in 9mm, but most of them are be some sort of 38 special. What are those competing with in a carry mode? For the most part, a lot of what they're competing with is the real small single stack 9mm and then the 380 autos. And all of your choices that you're going to get out of a 38 revolver are clearly going to trump terminal ballistics on a 380. That's just a given.
Yeah.
With a 2-inch 38, you have to be picky about ammo because the dirty little secret of 2-inch 38s is that hollow points tend not to expand. So when they tend not to expand, what I tell people to buy is for the very lightweight guns, you want to have lower recoil because your follow-up shots, recoil, inducing a flinch in practice, those are all practical things you got to worry about. So wad cutter 38s are low recoil, cut a full 38 caliber hole into the target. They go 38 in all the way through from start to finish, cut a very clean entry hole, which most jacket hollow points don't, and then continue until they come to a stop. So they can be a very effective anti-personnel load. The gun that you've got with like a 3-inch barrel, if you got a 38 or 357, let's say you're going to pick a 38 plus P, that's going to be something like the Gold Dot is one of the premier loads, 135 grain Gold Dot. Well, as far as penetration and expansion, that's going to be very equivalent to what you get out of a good premium 9mm service load because you got a longer barrel. If you look at how wide the bullet mushrooms and then how deep the bullet penetrates, because all you have with handguns is crush. Temporary cavity is pretty much meaningless until you get into long barrel 357 magnums, 44 magnums, things like that. So out of service calibers, 38 special, 9, 40, 45, it's all about crush cavity. So you can get ammo with the 38s that expands as wide as and penetrates as deep as through barrel gelatin or heavy clothing as much as it would be tactically equivalent to one of your 9mm service loads, maybe some of the 40s, things like that. With a 357 Magnum, because you have more horsepower, if you have a good bullet design, you can make good use of that extra horsepower. But often in an anti-personnel capacity, you got to know what ammo you're picking. I will tell you that when you look at the real micro 9s that we were talking about earlier, like the little bitty, whatever, Glock 34s, the Hellcats, whatever, you still have to be very picky about ammunition performance because the dirty little secret of those guns is there's a lot of those 9mm loads or the micro 40s and things like that aren't going fast enough to mushroom. So I was recently, I got a friend in a large California police department. We were talking about that. They have one issued 147 grain load. That's their ammo. Well, testing that ammo out of a Glock 43, which is his authorized off-duty gun, bullet doesn't mushroom. Bullet doesn't mushroom at all. So most people don't know that. So in theory, your 9mm it's got more velocity, it's got more kinetic energy, but if the bullet doesn't mushroom, then it acts like Full Metal Jacket. So that's acting like, any other, if it's a 38 round nose, 9mm round nose, 40 caliber round nose, it's still a round nose bullet. They're all going to have very, very similar damage. So if you're picking the right ammo for the right caliber for the size of gun that you got for the barrel length you have, that can get to be a little bit arcane. It's really easy to do for service-sized guns. You pick a major manufacturer, Remington, Winchester, Federal, Spear, go with one of their premium hollow points, done. For these concealed carry guns, not so much. But with the 357 you've got, what that gives you is one, if you can handle the recoil for the follow-up shots and maintain your accuracy, what that gives you is more velocity for the bullet to work, and much, much more reliably. It will mushroom like through heavy clothing in the winter when you have reduced velocities, things like that. So if you know what you're picking in a 357, there's some really good choices there that would have a little bit more horsepower than a 9mm plus P.
And I will note, like, I think it was like my second week at Taurus, we go out to this riders event, and we have a 605 357 there, and to watch a few of the riders come up and pop that 357 round on it, they're like, whoa, I think, that was, the people that shoot, we all know riders, so they shoot, but not a whole lot, but enough for them to know what's going on. And it still caught them by surprise, and that was something I was like, all right, so if I take that and stick that into somebody that just bought their first gun and let them have it, I was like, all right, so now, it seems like 38 Special is a more viable cartridge to me. I was just curious about the ballistics, because like I said, we do make a 9mm version of this gun. Mm-hmm. So, a 9mm, you got to run the clips and everything like that on it. But do you see the future of revolvers moving to more standard cartridges like that? I say standard, like a 9mm, like similar to your semi-autos and stuff. Or do you see it sticking around with the 38? That 38 seems to be like V round, right?
At one point, it was the most popular handgun round on the planet for a long time, and it definitely owned the police world, not just in the United States, but all over the world. The Canadian Mounties carried a 38, et cetera, et cetera. There's still places in the world that you go where cops are carrying 38 revolvers just because they don't have the budget to do anything else. But as you note with semi-auto cartridges, you got to have the moon clips. I have found moon clips can be a little fiddly, and if you bend them, it'll literally jam the gun. The motor doesn't want to rotate.
That's why I haven't got one yet. I'm just like, at that point, I'm just buying a semi-auto in my eyes. But some people are into that. But
so carrying moon clips without bending them is kind of problematic. You can't just throw them in your pocket typically. And then semi-auto cartridges in revolvers have a problem with, you can't crimp because they headspace off the case mouth. You can't crimp the bullet into the casing like you do with a revolver. So I have seen snub-nosed 9mm revolvers where when the gun recoils, inertia's in play. So the live ammo that's still in a cylinder, when the gun goes back, the bullet doesn't want to move. So the bullet will start telescoping out of the casing.
Jump crimp.
It'll jump the crimp. And if you do that, you can, if the nose of the bullet goes out far enough, then the cylinder isn't going to spin anymore. So I've seen that, depending on the ammo, being an issue. I think for some of the aficionados, that might be a thing, but I think revolvers work really well with revolver ammo, and that a lot of people that get into that will realize that. And then, quite frankly, the infrastructure and the known quantity of what it takes, like to make a good 38 special load, how you design the case, what powders you use, what bullet weights, etc., how to make it accurate. And obviously we've got that figured out for over 100 years. So
So something I posted about recently, specifically with this little tiny Smith & Wesson end frame, super lightweight 327. It's a 357 mag, super short barrel, 8-shot cylinder. It's smaller than other end frames. It's light. Wow, what a great conceal gun. But if we're throwing in full power magnum, all the recoil ends up in your hand. Now, like not like that, but I mean, like you feel it. It's like the gun. It's like the gun exploding in your hand. People need to find this balance, because if we have the super, it's lightweight, it's comfortable, all this, but you can't shoot it for shit. What's the use in even bothering?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a danger with when places are selling these super lightweight things. People read this and go, yeah, I'll carry that. And I'm going to carry 357 mag in it. And well, Chuck just brought up a point that I read about through Buffalo Bore ammo, and that's jump crimp. And they basically said, yeah, don't be using our heavy ammo through that super light guy, because your recoil is going to potentially create this jump crimp. Oh. And you were talking about the writers event and people shooting 357s.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's with so many options. Right now we live in such a cool time because we have so many awesome options and some really good selections of ammo. And then we have ourselves, and we need to somehow see what to use, what's going to work best for what our mission is, what's going to work best for the way we shoot, and then find the perfect package and not just say, well, I'm going to get the lightest and the smallest, and that is going to be my choice. Yeah. Because the odds are that you're probably not going to shoot that the best unless you're investing so much time. But all these are factors, and that's why. So this old 19, I would carry this over that. Yeah. So I got 2 less rounds. This is heavier, longer barrel. But you know what? Defensively, I would much rather carry this than that super light little guy.
One of the unexplored aspects of what we're talking about, something I've noticed with semi-autos and marketing, they're trying to make semi-autos more and more user customizable for hand fit, back straps on guns, interchangeable parts, things like that. I think a underappreciated aspect of defensive handguns or shooting handguns is gun to hand fit. So like that gun that Matt's got, that 2.5-inch K-frame, back in the day, that was a gunfighter's gun. That's what, like, a detective that was switched on, a plainclothes guy that was a gunfighter, that's what they would carry instead of like a J-frame in the primary. J-frame would become a backup. Well, one of the nice things about those is, and when you're giving up when you're talking about giving up the extra rounds versus the end frame, well, with that K-frame, you look at guys, Jerry Michalek, you look at the historical guys, Bill Jordan, they did incredible feats of high-speed marksmanship with those guns. They could pull those guns, fire very rapidly, hit small targets from great distances, and they were blindingly fast coming out of the holster doing it. One of the reasons they could do that is there used to be places back before Al Gore invented the internet, we had to do something called mail order. And there was a couple of places where you would put your hand on a piece of typing paper and you would trace your hand very carefully with a pencil. You would mail your hand picture, your little hand turkey there, to the company, and they would make stocks custom fitted to your hand. And then, like, your trigger reach and a lot of what we think about with marksmanship issues nowadays, you were fitting the gun to the hand. And that helped a lot of people shoot very well. You look at Bill Jordan grips. Bill Jordan was a big dude. He was like, 6'7", something like that, had big basketball player hands. Jordan stocks are oversized because, Matt, like a lot of people put oversized stocks on a J-frame. He had to put oversized stocks on a K-frame because he was such a big dude. But then that's the gun he carried as a service gun because it was lightweight, it was handy, and it was super fast out of the holster. These are all attributes that gunfighters knew about back in the day that were kind of lost. That I think
nuance.
That people are starting to rediscover some of these advantages, because like that 2.5-inch 357 with the right ammo, ballistically equivalent or better than any 940 45 service load that you're going to be able to come up with. Really fast as hell out of the holster because of how the shape the barrel length, etc. And with that rolling trigger, if you learn how to work that, you can be very, very accurately, very, very quickly. It's common for semi-autos to people bitch you like, what was the biggest bitch when the M&Ps came out? Well, the reset.
No reset.
Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit about reset?
Yep.
So Matt, show us the trigger pull and the reset on that K-frame.
Sure. And I'm gonna pin the trigger too, just for you.
No, don't do that.
I know.
So if you pull the trigger and then you let it out. So if that was a semi-auto, people would consider it the worst reset ever. Does that slow down?
This is awesome.
Does that slow down Jerry Michalek? Jerry Michalek can take a revolver and fire 8 rounds a second. You know, what I'm saying is that some of the stuff that people think is important, we know guys like Bob McGivern, Bill Jordan, Jerry Michalek have done amazing feats of super high speed marksmanship. In fact, I know there are people, when they were trying to see who could shoot the fastest, that would go with a revolver. And I say it was Ed McGivern. I misspoke. They would shoot a revolver because they could run a revolver faster. And something like a 1911, they were waiting for the gun to cycle and it was slowing them down.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's a different kind of speed right there.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that's about all I've got for me. I do hope, I told Matt, like when I wanted to get on here, I was like, I really wanted to be the newbie to, like I said, I am this guy right here that's getting into revolvers and learning about revolvers. I think I'm one of a lot of people in that category right now. And people like me, you're looked at by a lot of your friends and people that know you as the gun expert thing. And so you really don't like to admit, when you don't know about a topic. So I figured I would offer myself up as the guinea pig and, just ask the dumb questions and let people have at it. And, we may get 6 months down this and I may have a whole basel full more because with all of this, you learn so much in each category. And, I've just been opened up to a whole nother section of shooting and I feel like I am right back at square one, so.
Have we talked about the executive yet?
No, not yet.
About the specifics, what is different about the executive compared to all the other Taurus offerings?
Yeah, I can give you kind of a little spiel on that one.
Please.
Because it has been, Brett, and, I think my background too and what we're doing. So literally the first day I got there, that Brett was like, all right, man. I was like, we've got this that, we need to launch and kind of fine tune a little bit on a couple little things. And so that was like the first gun, which is right up my alley. And but what it is really is like we're trying to take a little bit of the ownership of like what Taurus brand was and where it's coming. Brett's done a great job of like fixing a lot of customer service issues, getting a lot of QC stuff in place and getting the relationships from Brazil on what the U.S. wants and our U.S. manufacturing up. And so I had this idea on this executive grade series to give us basically like a little bit of a playground. So the guns are bench built, not like assembly line. So we got dedicated product specialists. I wouldn't call them gunsmiths, but they're assembly techs. That's all they do is that series of gun. So because I consider a gunsmith like good gun, to be a very top level thing, and I've not shooken hands with these people yet, so I don't know if they quite got there on my book, but just a different approach for Taurus, and that's what we really wanted to get in place and see, like, is that something there? We have all these new shooters and stuff, and they're getting into the Taurus brand scene, but I still feel like what I talked about in the beginning is like we have everything in house, and if we took those right approaches from the beginning, we could deliver these really high quality guns at these still really kind of value prices. And you look at the executive grade and we looked at what was on the market. So you had the hand polished satin finish on it. We did the Ultimate stocks on it and walnut, and then chamfered cylinders, hand tuned trigger, just kind of went through that thing piece by piece. The parts are not any I won't want to say different. The cylinder's different, and like I said, everything's kind of tuned and just watched a little closer on that side to get the consistency down and all that stuff. And we did the bobbed hammer on it, and we wanted to look at that and where it was placed in the market. And you saw that gun kind of fall right around that $550, $600 range, and everything that was close to it when I was running like the competitor analysis were $150, $200 more than that gun. There was just nothing with those feature sets that fit it. And we're like, all right. And so now it's like, let's see if that gun fits into the market and see if it sells through. Do people want that from Taurus? Yeah, because that's the big question. I mean, if Taurus came out with a friggin', $2,000 2011, would people buy it? Why not? Taurus's name and where we're at right now, we've got to slowly get there. And this was our first step. And yeah, day one launch, sold everything we had and the amount of production that we can make for the year. So
yeah, it's a six shot, it's a 38 3-inch bobbed hammer.
Yep.
Yeah.
So 3-inch barrel, and that had so many. I was calling around. We were kind of getting a few riders involved with it, and they're like, "Why'd you go with the 3-inch?" And we just launched that the Defender series, this 3-inch barrel 856 and 605, and it had just taken off. People loved it. I think it was a little bit of a hybrid, and there wasn't really anything in that size out there on the market that was super comparable to it, and I think that's why that really took off, and it was a new look for Taurus. And so we're like, let's see. And honestly, I think that's what Brett liked the most too, and he's a shooter also. And that's really the process we're taking here. And like I said, I think it was the right move, but that executive grade series is going to be a little bit of a playground. Me and Brett's already been talking quite a bit, and our product development team, who's phenomenal, who's came over for some very significant companies, and we've got a good shooting crew built there, and we got some good ideas. The next few that are coming will be pretty quick to follow also on the lineup. So it's been a fun project.
Additional calibers coming.
Yeah, there's so much in that line coming. We'll continue to push stuff out. The only problem is like people are so used. I think they take for granted the sheer numbers that Taurus puts out into the market for Americans and for gun owners, of America. Honestly, it was just like getting that amount of guns. And I think people in the Taurus brand that are interested in it kind of take that for granted a little bit, because you go and you find them on the shelf. They're there, they're in stock. And that was something I fought at my last company a lot. And a lot of companies fight, is keeping like your popular items on the shelf. And you look at the executive grade, we can only make, it's like, I don't know, 20 a day or something like that. And when usually we can do a lot more than that, when they're on an assembly line and just rolling through. So I think you're already seeing that. Some of like the close people that follow the Taurus brand, they're like, I can't find an executive grade anywhere. They're sold out, and there ain't. And as soon as they come in, they're right back out the door. And a lot of the dealers already took pre-orders, and they're sold. And that's something cool to see from the Taurus perspective. I think that it gave us a little, especially me coming into it, is like I'm trying to learn the brand and learn who the customer is. And like I said, I get mocked for having nice things on my pistol. I was like, oh my God, what did I get into? But then I see things like the executive grade just take off. I'm like, all right, people will pay more for a Taurus. It doesn't have to be $300. I think we can, as long as we're getting that feature set of what people want. And still, like I said, we can come in under the price of everybody else. You look at the Raging Hunter series specifically, is like, amongst hunting revolvers, I mean, you're getting into $1,500, $1,800, $2,000 guns. You can go pick up a Raging Hunter that's optics ready. I mean, we were shooting. Brett was out there with a few riders. They're shooting 200 yards with the thing, no problem. And that was the capabilities we were given. They shoot great, and they're $1,000, for those. So, and that's the funny thing, is like, I think people kind of take that for granted a little bit, of just where the feature set comes in and what Taurus is. And when you get shooters and people that get out there and talk to people like, both of you and actually listen. And that was a conversation Brett and I had. It was like, we have to actually listen. You can't just, we've all been part of them, right? It's like people ask your opinion and you give it, and there's like, all right, check that box. Right? We asked your opinion.
Okay, it's a crossbow now. Wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's not what we want to do. We want to start those processes from the beginning on new projects and let that dictate what the U.S. market gets and what we produce. So it was a fun kickoff start. It meant a lot more to us internally than I think a lot of people outside will look at it. It's like, all right, it's a Bob Hammer hand polished gun, but for us, it really gave us a lot of data and analytics of like, all right, we can do this. And I think that should honestly scare a lot of people in the industry of when we start making guns that are shooter focused and our capabilities and hitting that price point. I put that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things that has been a dearth of on the market. It used to be when we're talking about new people, especially we had that again nowadays. People are like, hey, what going? Hey, gun guy, you're my gun guy. What gun do I get? And it used to be pretty good advice for a lot of people that you go find yourself like a Smith & Wesson Model 10 or Model 15 38 revolver or something that used to be in police service. It used to be very common on the shelf. You could find something like that. And then it became like a whole bunch of police surplus revolvers that were out there. Well, now, as Matt's finding out, you can shop and find a revolver, but you can't just like go to Academy or whatever. Like non-aficionados can't walk into a place or haven't been in some time and buy a good revolver for a decent price.
So, I've been hunting this for a long time. I haven't been able to find one reasonably priced since forever.
I will say they're a lot harder to make,
I realize that, but it's more complex in design and manufacture, more simple in usage, which is the user-friendly part. But something I was excited to see this executive when I heard that came out. I think there's a real niche and there's a real need, and a lot of people want to be able to go to the store, pick up a gun, get some ammo, plug and play. Maybe I buy the correct holster. Now I've got a system. I can go shoot this gun, get some proficiency with it, and I'm kind of set. And in the revolver world, in viable revolvers beyond the pocket-sized guns, there hasn't been anybody making anything in that niche that was user-friendly, easy to buy, that you could find commonly.
Yeah. And that's our goal. Is, like I said, when we look at it from a company, is being able to supply those guns, get them out there, and meet the demand as best as we can. But I don't know. Like I said, I got into that like kind of snobby phase where I would only recommend these expensive guns. And now I'm to the point I'm like, dude, so would you have a freaking gun and go shoot and then, and participate in this? And I thought there was a lot of value in that. And I was out there at this TV show filming yesterday, and I'm talking to one of the other manufacturers out there. And he was like so upset that his gun was like considered a budget gun in the category. And he wanted to influence the military and law enforcement sector. I was like, dude, and he's like, doesn't it bother you that, like a Taurus G3 is a budget gun? I was like, no, God, no. Because I was like, look at the freaking amount that we sell. I was like, that is a lot of Americans that are carrying a gun because they could afford the damn thing.
Well, as we discussed briefly earlier, also was, what is it like to be in the position you're in right now, where the history might not have been the best? We don't need to argue that. We don't need to discuss that. But the trend that you guys are going right now, how many companies get to do that and that get to show?
It had to be a perfect opportunity for me to come over here. And I've worked with Brett in the past, and he is one of my best friends. And there's a couple of us now that all work together. In the past, and that played a big part into it. But I looked at it, like I said, my personal goal. I was an ag teacher. I was not like a gun manufacturer guy. Like I had a greater purpose in life of teaching kids and educating and doing that side of it. But I found a lot of purpose in this. Like I seriously do want everybody to own a gun, and get out there and take part in this. And I saw that opportunity of like the sheer amount of new shooters and people that were coming into the shooting sports industry and our industry through Taurus because of that, that price point of the gun. I was like, all right. And then when I went and met with Brett and we're going through the manufacturing process and all this stuff, I was like, holy crap, like all this is here. Like we can change these few little processes and what we're doing. And it doesn't change the price of the gun, but it makes the gun a whole lot better. And I was like, that's dangerous. And that was one of my big decisions to like kind of come over here and learn and try to get that implemented in and hopefully kind of change the industry for good and start getting a more shooter mindset focus, in our industry. I think that's a little bit lacking.
Well, on traffic stops, when I see someone has a permit to carry, I usually end the traffic stop with, hey, I've a last question for you. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. It's just my own curiosity. I see you have a permit. What are you packing? And then have a nice little gun conversation. Most people say, no, I'm not. I don't have it. Well, why not?
Yeah,
you should be carrying that. Please carry. But then sometimes, and then, well, it's usually this, or and a lot of people either they have it or they don't. Most people don't have their gun with them. But yeah, Taurus is incredibly common. Oh, okay. Tell me about it. What do you like about it? Okay, cool. Yeah, it was inexpensive and I shoot it and okay, awesome. Sweet.
Yep.
You have it too.
Yep, exactly. That's awesome. And I had this, I asked one instructor one time, and like I said, me and you, we've been around lots of instructors and we know like this huge influx of new shooters. So he was getting a ton of new shooters coming in and I asked him, I was like, dude, how many people come through your class and shoot a Taurus? And he was like, man, so I actually keep the numbers on this stuff. And I said, he taught 700 people last year. 420 of them came through with a Taurus.
Yeah.
I was like, that is ridiculous, on those numbers like that. And he was like, those are pure just new shooters. And I was like, all right. And that's what made me start like kind of doing the research and analytics behind who was visiting the website, what their backgrounds were, like all this stuff of like who our customer is. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be the fun time. Cause I was like, if I can get them, show them like what you can do on the range and those avenues to get to like all of our cool instructors and the things that you can do. I was like, man, that's very influential and that'll get them on the right direction, whether they buy Taurus or not. Like I said, we have a wide array. I don't want them to buy one gun. I want them to buy 10 guns from us, So, but, when you look at it, they get into that training platform and start branching out and figuring out like a revolver fits their lifestyle, some specific sides of it. I think you learn that through training, getting out and shooting and carrying a gun. You don't learn that from the internet. Like said, I was like, gearing up or like tucking in my shirt. And I was like, oh man, like, I want a gun that fits this style a little better, and the revolver fit that need. So,
yeah.
So I went and found my dummy revolver. We were talking earlier that with the J frame, what mine looks like in my shooting grip.
Interesting. That I know it would take me. I know I just got to get out on the range and do it more. And like I said, I felt like Ricky Bobby out there trying to figure out where to put my thumbs because I'm just like, I want my thumbs, up here. I was like,
why isn't the cylinder moving?
Yeah, so I'm just like, where, like what to do with them. And I was like, God, I'm a shooter. Why do I not know this? So I've been experimenting with some, but I noticed like most of my work I've been practicing with this has been draw the first shot and then, a little bit of recoil control, but a lot of accuracy standards because of trying to get used to the double action trigger and this grip technique and stuff like that. And so the kind of more speed shooting and follow-up shots has been kind of a little further down my list till I get some of those other skills finally tuned in. So I am going to go try that grip probably this week while we're out on the range and doing some filming. So I'll let you know how that goes.
The secret to that one is you can grip really, really hard on a C-clamp grip with your support hand.
Yeah.
Like white knuckle grip, and it doesn't affect your shooting hand at all as far as trigger dexterity.
That's awesome. Interesting.
Cecil, do you have anything else?
Actually, I am working on a project. I haven't had time the last couple of weeks of planning it, but Chuck and I have been talking for years. So one of the first things we were bonding on was this idea that, arguably most private citizens could get by with a snub carried appendix and a second snub in your offside pocket or your ankle. You would cover almost any plausible shooting situation you could ever come up with, that 99.5% that a individual private citizen who's not involved in illicit activities, who's not involved in a illicit drug trade, not involved in a love triangle, and tries not or to minimize you're going to stupid places at stupid times with stupid people and do stupid things. And so one of the things I want to play with is actually running drills with that setup, and then just set it up as, okay, here's what it looks like you run like fast test with the semi-auto versus doing it this way. Not to say that, this is just as good, or if you don't carry this way, you're stupid. I'm not saying that, but this idea that maybe that it's not that tough to run a snub appendix and in a pocket or an ankle. And you've got 10 to 16 rounds, depending on your caliber, your gun. It's probably weight wise, not much more than carrying a full size auto. So not comparing apples to apples, but just, taking away that argument that the standard thing is, well, you're going to get killed in the streets because you only got 5 or 6 rounds and it's going to take you too long to reload. So I'm like, okay, I guess you could find a scenario where that's true, but man, for a private citizen.
Yeah, I hope that does go, because I'm going to start selling 2-packs of revolvers.
Yeah. Well, you got, at your guys' price point, right?
I know, man. We'll get them 2-pack for $600.
Because Chuck and I how long ago we started talking about this, Chuck? 10 years ago?
At least.
Where this was actually a thing. And I'm like, Chuck started talking like that. And I was thinking for a second, and I go, my immediate reaction was the tactical thing. Well, that's stupid. Yeah. And then I started thinking, well, hold on a second. Wait a minute. I'm in my life. I'm not in those situations. I'm not in those, where I'm kicking down the door. No, I'm not saying this is the setup for a cop, or that should be, the next military pistol setup for anybody. But for a private citizen, I think that makes a lot of sense for people who are comfortable shooting a revolver, and a lot of people won't. A lot of people will just feel better shooting a semi-auto. But I like metrics, right? I like numbers. I like to say, so if me as a shooter can do okay times running this, what would this be like in the hands of a Rhett Neumeier? What would this do in the hands of Chuck if he decided to run it this way, or Daryl, or, Caleb, somebody who could run this at a high level? So I'm going to do it at some point. I got to have enough free time to run, because I don't want to go to the range one time and run 3 drills and say, here it is. Here's the answer. I want to kind of get some data.
I get back to this point all the time. Is, like I said, I don't think there's one gun, that does everything great, and then I find it really, I don't know. If I show up to the range with my Taurus G3 or whatever, and I'm shooting against a bunch of guys with staccatos or whatever, they're probably going to make fun of me for this. And I find that ridiculous, because I find it way more embarrassing when you spend all that money on those guns and then can't shoot them.
I ran into that. I had a dude that I was supposed to qualify here the other day in a merchant guard scenario, and he had a Langdon Beretta with a dot, and he had a staccato with a dot, and he couldn't shoot. He had, what are we talking, $7,000 times with 2 pistols, and he couldn't pass your basic police qualification for our state. You know, and I run into what you're talking about is, you know, when we had just transitioned to Glocks back in 06 at my job, and I like good guns. I've shot bullseye competitively. I've shot, you know, USPSA and IDPA and things like that. But when I was a range master for my job before, you know, back in the day, one of my guys would come walking into the armory into my office and be like, "Hey, Chuck, look what I got." And this guy had walked in with, I think it was a Nighthawk, but it was a high-end 1911. "Look what I got." And I knew he was a moderate shooter. He passed. He didn't have to get remediated. He never shot 100%. But look what I got. And I played with a gun. It's a nice gun. Asked him what he paid for it. And I realized when we had done our transition, I had bought a Glock 17, a Glock 26, holsters for both guns, a case of ammunition, and a weekend at my friend Marshall Luton's shooting school down at TDSA Tulsa. And I had less money invested than he had in a gun in a box.
Yeah. And those are the stories that because I'm like, man, if you got the money, go spend it. And trust me, I've got ridiculous amount of money in guns myself, you know. But I was like, I remember when I first when I took the job at Taurus, I had to like reel back in my shooting career. And I remember going and like when I bought my first, you know, AR, old Bushy, you know, Bushmaster, right? I think we've all owned one of those throughout time. And I remember looking at an ACOG and going, oh my God, it was like $1,000, you know? And I was like, who spends $1,000? And now I've got Mark Fives and aim points out the, you know, at the butt around. And I was like, all right, that's not the average citizen there, you know? And I was like, if you got to go spend it, do whatever, but don't ridicule the people that bought guns and went to the range. It's like making fun of a fat person at the gym, you know. Exactly. It makes no sense.
Yep.
And I see it all the time. Like I said, I was because nobody knew who I was whenever I got on the Taurus side, and I posted a picture of I told him like a gun with nice stuff on it, and yeah, people like ridiculing me, like, oh, this guy probably doesn't shoot at all, doesn't barely shoots, just spends a bunch of money on guns. Dude, I had like, I think that comment, one of the owners groups had like 250, 260 comments on it, basically just ridiculing me. And then the next post I did, I did the black belt standards with a G3 and 10 comments, you know, it's just nothing. Yep. So, you know, that internet culture of just like beating people, it's out there. That's why the internet exists, right? But I think while we're at the range and trying to get that point across, like this mission specific style of guns, I think is a lot more effective, especially as a shooter. You know, I think we can step back and look at it and be like, all right, you know, if I sold this one $1,500 gun that really only does one specific task, okay, and I went and bought 3 guns that gets me through every situation imaginable in a concealed carry aspect, that's more valuable to me now, you know, as long as the guns work, right? They got to work and they got to be true on accuracy. And, I think you're good, you know, and I think that's a cool kind of shooter standpoint for us that we're looking at, you know. By no means are we there yet, you know, there's a long way to go, but, you know, like I keep saying, like listening to people like you and taking these back and really putting it into the product development processes and what we're trying to learn and push. And two, I want to get y'all's knowledge into the new shooter, you know, like as quick as possible.
Yes.
Because, you know, like the people that find PNS in their shooting career, how long have they been shooting? A while, you know, they're established shooters, you know, and like that information, it took me a long time before I got to know instructors. Like, you know, when I was competitive shooting, I shot competitively for 4 years before I just, you know, I saved up enough money to go take a Max Michelle class. You know, but then I was shooting for 7 years before I found people like Bill Blowers and Scott Jedlinski and, you know, Nick Young, you know, like all the people over at Walther. And, you know, now I'm like finding all this new stuff. And I was like, people to find that style of crowd a lot quicker, you know, and I think we have a ripe opportunity to be able to do that for new shooters out there. Because I think it is, I would much rather have somebody just don't go into debt to buy a gun, you know, like there's rebates going on right now. Like, you know, you can buy a G3 or G3C right now for, you know, $250 on rebate. Like, train, you know, learn this stuff. It's available to you out there. So I think it'll be a fun path. And then watching this revolver craze just go, I think you're going to see, I think, you know, from us and a lot of other manufacturers, you're going to see a lot of product development, a lot of engineering time get pushed in the revolver segment because of the popularity right now.
Yep.
So I think the technology jump in the revolver scene over the next, you know, 5 to 10 years is going to be wild to me. And I asked this question earlier. I was like, you know, is this gun in 10 years, does it have, you know, interchangeable comps and red dots and all that stuff? It might, you know, and I think people laugh at that stuff now. Like if Caleb Giddings posted his revolver with his acro on just the plain old new shooters,
it makes sense,
page or something. Yeah, you know, like do people buy into that? You know, it takes, I mean, look how long it took for red dots to become a thing on semi-autos. They were around forever. They still, you know, Chuck talked about this earlier about, you know, people putting comps and stuff like that on revolvers in the 70s. So
non-reciprocating red dots.
Dude, don't even get me started on that. I have been asking for that, and every time I ask for that, an engineer just like wants to slap me. I see it in their face, you know, but that's what this is now, you know, that's what that is.
To reiterate something Cecil said that I think is really important. So this K-frame Model 19, the grips on it are awesome. It came with grips like this. They're okay. The modularity is amazing, that you can do all kinds of mixing and matching with grips and make them much more effective.
They're unserialized grip modules.
Yes. This is true.
Man,
this is true.
That was out before.
Yeah. But yeah, it really adds additional value to be able to customize like that. It's great.
I might start marketing my the grips we sell as grip modules shipped to your door.
You should,
right? I mean,
that's the language, right? That's the language. Whereas
modular.
any old revolver guy completely understands that, right? So Daryl actually, he got me into this. So, you know, you start reading the old books from, you know, 20s, 30s, 50s and stuff. And I discovered these old grips called Mershons. And for me, I think they're the best. For me, my hand, they're the best feeling shooting grip for a revolver. Now they're a little big for ideal concealment. I've actually got a set I'm trying to slowly grind down to see if I can make it something. And I bought 3 or 4 of them off eBay for like $20 each.
Yeah, I'm looking at them right now. That's interesting.
Yeah, they're great. And the thing about them is these are from the 40s and 50s. So all the revolver guys knew, hey, we could do this, or we could do this. And God, who was it? It was in Chick Gaylord's book talked about it, Bob Nichols' book. So from the early 50s, and Chick Gaylord was probably 1960. They're talking about changing grips for this. And I mean, in Gaylord's book, there's like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 different grips for guns. And it's like, but now the current thing is, oh my God, you mean for my semi-auto, I can change out the grip module? Oh yeah, exactly. Like we've been doing since revolvers were a thing. So you might as well, you know what? Play the sales game, right? Here's 856 grip modules. People buy it just because of that.
Oh my God, it's hilarious, isn't it? Oh my gosh.
So speaking of old technology and modularity, then we have grip adapters.
Yeah, exactly.
And so basically you have the grip like this. Well, you know, I don't like it as much. Add something like that fills in that gap. And all of a sudden I find it's much more shootable.
And it's still really concealable.
Yeah.
It really adds to the shootability of those guns with absolutely zero compromise in concealed carry.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great. Those are what's running on my 2-inch Model 10 right now because they just work so well. Why go and do all these other things just to have something cooler? Like, my $20 T-grip thrown on that gun. It's such a funny thing. And because it's not popular, because revolvers are not popular and there's so few people who understand how to run them, that there's, and I think the majority of people who talk online about shooting are probably have come into this in the last 20 years. So their memory, like you said, Cody, you started with this pathway of, well, you got to get this gun. You start with this gun because this is what is in the magazines, it's in the books and the DVDs and all this kind of stuff. And the thing that drives me crazy in the gun community is that they're always poo-pooing what comes next until enough people say, yeah, it's cool.
Exactly.
Red dots, perfect. Well, I remember when Red Dots, a few years ago started making that climb. Well, why'd you need that? Oh, it's not going to work. It's this. Well, yeah, okay. It's new technology. You got to work out the bugs. And now it's like, what do you mean you don't have a red dot on your gun? Listen, dude, 3 years ago, you were making fun of me for having one.
Yep.
So shut up.
The gun industry, though, and I talk about this all the time. Is like we're really held back by that as manufacturers. Because you take guns like as a little side hustle, and then I really do got to go. But like you look at like the Hudson pistol, right? When it came out, it had its flaws and stuff, but the comments on how that gun looked, because it didn't look like a standard pistol, right? It didn't have the the increase on the rail and stuff like that for your weapon light, and it just looked different. And I don't think people will not buy into that because it doesn't have that image of like what a gun looks like.
Yep. And
I think it's tough because if you do come out with something, you look at the Alien pistol right now, Malgo, crazy expensive, right? It's very tough to manufacture, and it's not going to be. But I still think even if you took that gun and made it, affordable, like do the normal guy, the 90% of the gun market, do they want to buy that? It's going to be tough, You look at the 1911 still sells quite a bit because that's what a gun looks like, And there's something to that, So we'll see how it goes, though. Well, guys, I've got to call it. It's
so final. Let's get your final thoughts, final plugs. What you got?
I'm gonna let them go first, and then I'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to hear theirs. I want to
Cecil.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of revolvers. I always have been. I think they have a super important place. Like I said, with deep concealment. I'm not a gear hardware focused guy as the answer, but in certain aspects of an entangled fight, I can kind of point to a couple features where a revolver is slightly better, at least theoretically, than a semi-auto. And you know what? A lot of people just feel comfortable running a revolver. I'm sorry. We can make fun of them, which I think is stupid. We can make fun of them for not wanting to run, whatever the cool guy gun is. But why run somebody off? If they feel comfortable running a revolver, let's get them on our side. Let's get them carrying guns. Let's let them support Second Amendment. Let's get them to support our right to self-defense, and at least they're armed. That's my thing. And, plugs, immediate action combatives, www.ia combatives. I hate the sales part, so I'll leave it there.
Okay. Chuck?
Since we were talking about, this the whole time, and people point out the obvious, like less capacity, things like that. But some of the things we've talked about, the form factor of the revolver, shape, size, features, things like that. people find it hard to believe, but there are things that revolvers still do to this day better than semi-autos do. We've talked about a few of those things. So, when I bring up like baby cops are asking me, what should I get for a backup gun? When I suggest that some of the snub nose revolvers are a really good choice, they look at me like I'm crazy. Revolvers, that's what cowboys carry, that kind of thing. And I have to explain the advantages of what they bring to the table in specific roles. Nowadays, they're a teaching tool for me. They're a fun tool. They're a niche concealed carry tool, and then they're a field pistol, like going deer hunting, things like that. So some of the things that I use them for, they definitely work better than semi-autos do, but that doesn't mean I can own both. And
Yes.
I'm pretty sure Cody would be happy to sell you both. So
I will.
I have seen, and when we're talking about the crime aspect and things like that, I have seen a number of cases in the police world and in the civilian world in self-defense. When we're talking about the sock drawer thing, I remember a gentleman that bought a flat latch Model 36 and loaded it with Lawman service cartridges back when before Spear owned Lawman, and he put it in his sock drawer like in 1958. And one day he had a home invasion and he had not handled that gun since. And what we ended up with was a dead bad guy because that guy had made that investment way back in the day. And the gun still worked, and the gun still worked in a condition where a lot of semi-autos may not have worked. It was, and Cecil like this, it was an entangled fight as well. It was
no, Ken, that never happens. That never happens, Chuck. Never happens in the real world.
It was a home invasion, contact distance, entangled fight. And I'm utterly convinced if that dude had bought anything else back in the day, he probably wouldn't have lived through the event. But, I kind of digress. My business, my side gig, my training business is Agile Training and Consulting, agiletactical.com. Cecil and I train together. We just got done training with our friend Daryl Bolke, who's another revolver guy. So I do a lot of training, do revolver specific training. I think, there's not a lot of people teaching that anymore. So sounds like Matt may have some interest in videos, perhaps on this subject, because I hear that there's not that many cool videos on how to run a revolver anymore.
Well, I'm thinking August, but you're in on that project.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Cody, if you need to come out to Utah in August,
Yeah.
we're going to do a video shoot.
It's nice. I like it. Good weather too.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
Cody, final thoughts, plugs?
Yeah, so I really do want to say thank you for that. I know that was probably, I know y'all get this question. Being revolver shooters, you probably get most of the questions I asked you a million times. So I appreciate you going through some of those. And like I said, I did just really want to be the guinea pig, because I do strongly feel like there is a lot of people like me right now that are very much into shooting and are just now kind of coming around to this revolver because of the specific features that they bring to our everyday carry lifestyle and what we're out there doing. So from a civilian aspect. So I'm really excited to get on this. And I want everybody to know, like, these are things that we're collecting and putting into the future of what Taurus is, and, Brett was on this podcast talking about, where it's headed and what his direction is. And that's why I'm here too. And, we do want to better the product and get it out there to more and more people. And we want to make sure that we take the shooter's perspective, like from actually people that shoot and train, they're tough. They're tough to find now with the amount of things on the internet, so we want to make sure we get the right information. So, but yeah, keep a close eye on the Taurus brand. We'll be doing a lot of cool videos around a lot of this stuff and pushing it out there and trying to make sure, like, if you're a big time shooter, and you're always getting the questions from the new shooters, hopefully we can help ease those questions into you a little better. and get people out there training with all you instructors a lot quicker too. So keep a close eye on us. We got a lot of new cool stuff coming, and make sure you kind of visit our website. It's taurususa.com, and then all the pages Taurus USA. Also, just comment if you got any questions and stuff. Like I said, we're trying to get better and trying to be better constantly. We feel like we've got the right roadmap in place. So we're excited to get the group of shooters that we have on the team and that are in executive positions. There's not a lot of companies out there that have the type of shooters that we have in executive positions. So it'll be fun to watch. It'll be a fun journey for myself and all my friends I'm working with there. So, but yeah, that's all I got. I appreciate y'all letting me be the guinea pig.
Thanks for, I think that's made for a really good discussion. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for anyone that's been watching, listening, considering, I don't know. As I say at the end and sometimes at the beginning of these episodes, make sure you are supporting those sources that you have found to be beneficial. If you like what these guys have to say, if you like their content, and if you like other guys that have been on primary and secondary, make sure you find them, make sure you subscribe, like all that kind of stuff, share. Make sure you do that also with primary and secondary. Don't forget, you need to like the video right now. So hit like. Big thanks to our sponsors. Big thanks to Big Tex Ordnance, Filster, Primary Arms, Walther. Huge thank you to our Patreon subscribers. I mentioned a little bit, we're going to be doing a video shoot in August, and I have an open invite to Patreon subscribers to come and join us, be part of the staff, be part of the crew to get some of these videos done. There's a good possibility if you do show up, you'll probably be one of the shooters featured in the videos as well. Have a couple different codes to share with you right now. If you go to preparewithp&s.com, that gets you to a website that has emergency preparedness type food at a discount. Right now, I'm kind of concerned with what's going on in the world. Personally, I've been buying this kind of stuff up. I had contact, they kind of cold called me, and I thought, you know what? It would be nice to be able to provide some kind of a resource like this to people. So there's that. Also, if you happen to be in the market for a fixed or folding knife, Scallywag.com has a code with us. I like Scallywag, or Scallywag Tactical, excuse me. I really like their knives. I have a lot of their knives now. PNS10 gives you 10% off. As a matter of fact, I can't think of the knife. One of their folders is my everyday carry. It's blue. It's not in my pocket right now. It had to be borrowed upstairs. Great stuff. No idea what our next episode is going to be. Don't forget, though, primary and secondary does have a forum. We have 763 different Facebook groups. We have a website. Articles go up on occasion. Videos get uploaded on occasion. But we have all these resources there for your benefit. If you want to help support the network on Patreon, go to patreon.com/primary and secondary. From there, as a subscriber, you get access to Discord, a lot of discussions, a lot of behind the scenes discussions that we don't talk about in public, specifically talking about some of the videos that we're going to be putting together. That is pretty much it. Again, if you haven't messed with revolvers, now is a good time. You're able to find stuff like Model 10s, Model 64s for under $400 on Gunbroker. That's not a bad price for what it is right now. You could have got them 5-10 years ago for half. But it's a great place to start. Great for dry fire. You can customize them. The grip, you can change up the grips.
Grip module.
Yes, but they're just cool. And also like a small little J-frame, little snubby. If you haven't tried one of these appendix, you're missing out because it might wind up being the solution you've been looking for. There's nothing wrong with choosing something like this for defense. Don't listen to what all the people, when everyone says you need to carry like a staccato, it's not true. I carry one on duty. It's a great gun, but I don't carry it all times. That's all. I'm going to go, and I think I'm getting texts that I need to change a diaper of a little boy who's running around with a dirty diaper upstairs. So that's all. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Thanks, guys.